Knowingly fell victim to a malicious focus group that convinced them cinnamon-flavored Mountain Dew was the next big thing.
The people in the focus group, they couldn't get enough of it. And then they said, the more cinnamon, the better. So we are going to put in more cinnamon. We are really excited for people to try this product.
According to PepsiCo's data, all gathered from a single group of ill-intentioned respondents, customers of all ages will love the new soft drink's murky brownish-green color and will soon be lining up to try the carbonated beverage jam-packed with ground cinnamon. Various members of the focus group told reporters they believed the company had made a great decision.
Cinnablast is the best. I mean, I can't wait to tell all of my friends to go buy this thing.
Yeah. The only way they can make it better is if they took a couple of raw eggs, mixed them up in the bottle. People would go nuts.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
This is Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Thanks for joining us, one and all. I'm Gardner Goldsmith, the founder of the Liberty Conspiracy, and you can listen to us every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Listen and watch us on Rumble, on Rockfin, on YouTube, and on my Twitter/X, which is at Gard Goldsmith. You can also find us after the fact at Rumble, Rockfin, and YouTube. And of course, you can always find me at X at Gard Goldsmith and on Gab as at Gardner Goldsmith. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're going to go with our news flash, and therefore, we're getting the light from the flashlight.
Joe Biden is out of the race, as many people predicted and preempted. And what can we take from that most immediately? I suppose one thing we know for absolute certain is that the virtue and morality that undergirds that party is pretty flexible, isn't it? That guy, he's our president. Now, remember before the debate, people were somehow trying to maintain the idea that he was potent and coherent, and the debate, in a sense, represented the pinnacle of that extraordinary lie. And now we've had an assassination attempt, Biden's resignation, the endorsement of Kamala Harris, but most of us have been watching Kamala Harris too. And of course, no claim of senility can be made, but this is not a garrulous and easy political figure. This is someone who does not seem at ease around public speaking.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
It's extraordinary. We're witnessing, I think, a kind of almost a contraction of time. The things are speeding up.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been.
We can be unburdened, all of us, by what might be. This is a real chance for us to let the past be unburdened by the future of what might have been.
Shots fired. Did he get one? Apparently he was shooting at the stage.
What? There's deer on the stage?
They're saying he shot Trump.
What? That doesn't sound right. Let me check Twitter.
You're in charge of the investigation of your own failure. So how is anybody in America supposed to be able to trust the results of that investigation as being anything transparent and genuine?
That's the last question, but please feel free to answer the question, Director.
Sir, I've been a Secret Service agent for nearly 30 years. I have led with integrity, and I follow our core values of duty, justice, honor, loyalty, and courage.
Yes? Oh, hello. Hello. We're Mary's parents. Oh, well, come on in, fellas. Hold it a second. Mary's parents burned to death last year. Wait a minute. I know you guys. You're from the news flash.
So suddenly a guy in a gray suit walks up the ladder and goes up to the roof. And this guy in the gray suit, who didn't appear to have credentials, everybody assumed he was the Secret Service. So he tells one of the local law enforcement, send those pictures to this cell phone. And he gives him a number. and everybody assumed, well, that must be Secret Service. It turns out it wasn't Secret Service.
Some guy in a suit walks up the ladder. They believe he was Secret Service. I'm not sure whether they gave credentials, but that's part of again, Maria, this is so preliminary. I'm issuing this. I'm providing this information, a much more detailed timeline to prompt others to come forward. We need to complete this picture. We have a lot of puzzle pieces to fill in here.
Is it odd to you that the locals were being told to send the pictures to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, ATF? Where does ATF come in?
It's very the oddity starts with the fact that local law enforcement were just tasked with securing the perimeter, told to go cover that AGR building, not really told where to set up, so they set up on the second floor. They went to that AGR building at 10:30 in the morning. So they were stationed there well in advance. They noticed this suspicious character at 5:10. They took a photo of him at 5:14. The president was shot at 6:11. So again, an hour has passed. Again, they don't communicate. They didn't have communication, same channels with their law enforcement patrol officers.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. CBS News has learned U.S. intelligence officials detected an Iranian plot against former President Donald Trump. Two officials confirmed they found out about the threat recently, and it was shared before Trump's rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. But there's no information suggesting the threat was connected to the attempted assassination over the weekend. Let's bring in CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. She formerly served as the Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention for the Department of Homeland Security in the Biden administration. So, Sam, what do we know about this threat, and why is Trump a target?
Well, Lindsay, I am unsurprised by reporting that there have been additional Iranian threats to Mr. Trump. During my time at the Department of Homeland Security, I worked with the U.S. Secret Service and others to review threats facing protectees, U.S. Secret Service protectees. And based upon Mr. Trump and his cabinet's decision to engage in the assassination of an individual named Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, an entity that conducted terror attacks and supported terror attacks around the world. The Iranian regime vowed to avenge that assassination, and there have been an ongoing series of threats to Mr. Trump and specific members of his administration when they were in office and since they left office, Lindsay.
Director, do you have the ability personally, and do you have the authority to beef up security of any of your protectees?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So were you also aware there was a credible threat President Trump was facing? He was facing a heightened security threat to a foreign adversary?
Yes.
Okay. So given that there was an increased threat to President Trump's life, was he provided a full security complement akin to what a sitting U.S. president would receive?
He was provided a full complement of security based on the threat assessment that we had.
That's not my question.
At the venue.
My question is, if he'd been the sitting president, would he have had the same security he had on July 13th, or would have been beefed up?
There is a difference between the sitting president.
So your answer is he didn't.
And continuity of government and the responsibility.
So he did not. Okay, there wasn't a CAT team, a full CAT team on site. There wasn't counter surveillance teams on site. But this is the thing. You just said you had the ability to beef up the security. You knew about the threat, and you didn't. And that's as telling as it is chilling.
Tour from the news flash.
The Heartland Institute first started to address global warming back in 1993. And back in 1993, we identified that as the mother of all environmental scare tactics. The environmentalists, the left actually, not environmentalists, groups on the left, understood that if you can control energy, you can control human beings. And that's what it was all about. This was a search for a scientific justification for a political agenda that was set well back in the 1960s and the 1970s. Of course, it goes back to the 1930s, and it goes back probably to the dawn of human civilization. But the whole idea is control energy. And if, in fact, the combustion of fossil fuels is having a dangerous impact on climate, you have a recipe for controlling all use of fossil fuels. That's 80-90% of all the energy. If you can control that and shut it down, you can shut down the engines of the world. And that is no less than what the environmental movement wants to do and has been trying to do now, going on 30 years on the global warming debate.
Yes, my friends, a lot of breaking news and a lot of reminders for the context for tonight's program. So let's get it started first by saying a big hello to the wonderful people inside X, the individual who goes by the moniker, I Can't Believe. Jump, 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 flashlight. Thank you, I Can't. Carolyn Rose is there. Hello, Carolyn Rose. I salute you. And M.E. Moore is there as well. You are a princess in my eyes. You're fantastic. Thank you all for conversing with each other. And thank you all for giving me such nice greetings. I really appreciate that. And also, I want to mention to you that if you are inside Rockfinville, please remember that if you get the chance, I hope you will sign up to be a follower of Grand Theft World, in addition to David Knight, America Unplugged, and Occult Priestess, and Wayne McCroy, and folks like that, because last night, I just want to compliment them. They gave me so many ideas for some of the additional things that I'm covering tonight. So Grand Theft World, Richard Grove, good guy. And he even gave me a shout out a few weeks ago, which was real nice. Played one of my segments on his show. So you can't go wrong with that. So let's get to our first segment, everybody. It's part of the news flash into the major stories. I could have the big story playing right now. The person who goes by I Can't Believe has mentioned that. But no Joe Piscopo tonight. Instead, I've got a little theme. This is from a band. I really dig these guys. I don't know whether you all might know them. Maybe some of you do. If you're into this kind of music, I bet you do. But a lot of people, they might not know these guys. I like them a lot. They're called the Asian Dub Foundation. And they did a song called Target Practice, which is great. It's about government snipers. I wasn't going to play that tonight, but I did want to play this one in relation to Joe Biden dropping out of the race. Let's hear the song, Who Runs This Place?
I don't know who runs this place. I don't know who runs this place. I don't know who runs this place. Tell me how high I've got to go, all the way from God to the devil below, before I get to what I really want to know. I don't want to know. Who runs this place?
That's a very good question. Okay, and a nice little abbreviated, nice point to stop the music right there. That was a game show. My mom was in the background on a show called Stop the Music out of New York. If you're old enough, you might have seen it. It was back in the black and white days, early days of television, and she was one of the phone operators there. It wasn't the real phone things. They had the real phone operators off camera, but they had like models and stuff up front. And, they had the headsets on as people were calling in to say that they knew what sort of song it was, sort of like Name That Tune. And so she was one of them there. So I don't know if there's any footage of my mom on there on YouTube or anything like that, but I'll have to go searching for that. That'll be a lot of fun. So as we know, Joe Biden is out, and there is, I think perhaps you might have seen these things as well. It certainly appears as if many people in the pop media are disconsolate, if not degenerate, and that they are not happy with the fact that they've been exposed for having been shills for this presidency for so long. As we know, just a few weeks ago, it was Smoking Joe Scarborough talking about how this man is cogent. He's the best Biden ever. Right? Okay. So then I think the clearly planned unraveling to show that Joe Biden wasn't doing well because they knew that they couldn't continue with him in the campaign. Now questions arising from various people who are wondering, okay, if he's not good enough to run for office, then how is he good enough to stay in office now? Well, maybe some people might use an excuse to say, for example, Nancy Pelosi, she has come out in favor of Kamala Harris with her support. And despite the fact that originally when Joe Biden put out his letter, he did not mention Kamala Harris. It wasn't on his official letterhead. People are asking who drew this up. Was it someone who was a legal advisor inside the White House? Most of that stuff to me is really, it's not going to get you very far because whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, policy changes are not going to be erupting like popcorn in a microwave. It's going to be pretty much the same deal, right? So a lot of the speculation about the Machiavellian moves that have been going on inside the White House and the plots and plans to try to get the election and so on, I understand that people are driven by a desire to try to get a grip on what they think might be happening in November. But to me, the speculation about it, there are a couple major facets, and then the rest of it, I just sort of let it go by. So who wrote the letter, whatever, some people talk about it. I spoke a little bit about Joe Biden's memory problems. And the big thing they had to get past was his ego, because people who have memory problems, especially the early stages of Alzheimer's, good people tend to look like affable but forgetful people, but nasty people, the nastiness really comes out. And I think that's what you've been seeing with Joe Biden. But Nancy Pelosi, she said she was proud to support Kamala Harris after people recognized that both the media was screwed up promoting the president as having his cogency, and that there was a bit of ambiguity regarding whether Biden was supporting Harris or what was going to happen. So, of course, we all know how great pride is in the Bible, and leave it to Nancy Pelosi to use that term. Good Catholic she is. So, in the meantime, we have Nancy Mace, and we may or may not play Nancy Mace when she was confronting Don Cheadle, the head of the Secret Service, and she used the S word in the Capitol building. So, there you go. In the middle of the swamp, they got her dropping that one. Some people have said that that's inappropriate. I really, whatever. They're taking my money. That's much worse than the language they might be using there. But I understand. Daniel McAdams sort of brought it up and said, yeah, that wasn't cool either, even though this woman Cheadle's not cool. So we've got the use of the term pride, the S word in the Capitol building, all these little accoutrements to get people fired up. But there are some substantive things to look at when it comes to Biden dropping out, Harris possibly going in, and then looking at the Secret Service stuff and the shooting, the attack on Donald Trump, and the killing of a 50-year-old father. So first, let's take a quick look at one of the things that I think is a valid point to make about how everybody is so focused. As we've said here before, and maybe you've had conversations about this over the dinner table or sitting with your friends at work having a soda or something like that. How did it get to this point? Who runs this place? How is it that one person can have so much power over all these alphabet agencies that have been created, over warfare, over thousands of people getting killed all around the world every month? How is it that someone can get such power? And I feel like maybe we're in good company, because one guy said this to another guy on a very good show. He's Ron Paul.
Hard mess that this is. And, the other thought I had was, what would it be like? This is my daydreaming. What would it be like if we just didn't have a president? That's why I think about the Swiss. They have a very weak president. Yeah. But we have weak presidents, and we have weak Congresses, and we have everybody's thinking about their own political careers and their money and the power. But it's mainly the power that they're looking for. When I think about the real the individual that was most involved, and I may well be wrong on this, but I think this is a Pelosi deal. And the irony is she's trying to work this out and save this guy that's 81 years old, or get rid of one of the guys. She was the oldest of the group. She's 84. Yeah. So the whole thing about the age, I've never enjoyed using that as the big issue, but it is a big issue. It's just because I see it more as an illness with evil, on what goes on.
So right. I think he states it so well and so conversationally. It's terrific. And of course, they're on every Monday through Thursday together at noontime on Rumble. So please check them out. And then on Fridays, Ron Paul is usually with economist Chris Rossini. So let's head into what I think might be one of the major stories. And again, if you're one of the paid subscribers over at Substack or at my Subscribestar, I'll try to make sure all these links are available for you. So this one is pretty big. The GOP, according to RT, the Republican Party is going to try to block Kamala Harris from using the Biden campaign funds, to be reiterative. And I was texting with David Knight yesterday about this, and that was the first thing he mentioned. He goes, the first thing is the money. It's the money. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So he was right on target. Kamala Harris cannot use Biden's election campaign funds, says the Washington Post, and the RT has this covered. Some Republican-aligned lawyers claim she can't touch the millions that have been raised for the president's 2024 bid. Vice President Kamala Harris. Oh, in fact, wait a minute. You know what? We've got such a big staff. Let me invite our time-traveling 1930s black and white newsreader guy to come in and read a little bit of this story, because he's a super special guest, right? So let's get him in. Can we open the time portal, guys? I'm talking to our off-camera staff. You know how it works here. Big staff. Yeah, okay. You can't hear them, but I can hear them. You know, it's the way it goes. I can hear them. It's not schizophrenic in any way. It's totally fine. Yeah, okay, cool. We can do it. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's open the time portal, and soon we'll have a special sound effect for that, and go sort of black and white. Just imagine black and white, and go to our super time travel in 1930s newsreel reader voice guy. Are you there, newsreel reader voice guy? Can you hear me, my friend? Can you hear me? Give us the story, dude. That's right, Gardner. I'm here, traveling through time from a wonderful time. Wunderbar, you might say. Living in the world of Franklin Delano Rose. Okay, so, let me just take another drink. Okay, great. Here's the story, G-Man. Dateline Washington. Vice President Kamala Harris, who has been tapped by U.S. President Joe Take him behind the gym and beat him up Biden to run in his place, has no authority to control funds raised by his election campaign. Let's go to the newsreel footage. The Washington Post has reported that finance lawyers for the Republican Party are citing this information. An attempt to use the money could result in a lawsuit, the Washington Post added. After announcing his withdrawal from the U.S. presidential election race on Sunday, Biden endorsed Harris. It was a few minutes after people spoke up and said, "Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand? You haven't endorsed Harris yet." Well, God, I think it's going to be a very exciting and much groundbreaking race, and so many things will be different. Sort of like when we had to live under FDR. And it was the same over and over. Back to you, God. Hey, thanks so much there, time travel guy. I guess he's got it kind of tough right now coming from the Great Depression era. And, you know, you can tell he just loves FDR. He knows FDR is going to pull him right out of that Great Depression. We'll be back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Thanks for listening, everyone. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. With fees of less than a penny per transaction, Dash is made for spending. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That's dash.org.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Former US President Barack Obama and his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, have given their official endorsement to Kamala Harris for president. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
In a phone call that was posted on Kamala Harris's social media channels, Barack Obama tells Harris, "We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office." Then, in a later statement, the couple said they would do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Since Harris's elevation to becoming the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee, Barack and Michelle Obama had held back from any endorsement of Harris, as many prominent Democrats offered their support. Barack Obama has cast himself as an impartial elder statesman of the party, not wanting to become too involved in the process of choosing a candidate himself. Meanwhile, it's been reported this morning by US media that Kamala Harris is hoping to have chosen a running mate to be her vice presidential candidate by the 7th of August.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with former US President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida home on Friday to get support for Israel's fight against Hamas. The two last met in person 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House. FSN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has met with multiple US leaders and officials this week, pushing for continued Washington support. The latest talks between Netanyahu and the Republican candidate for president, Donald Trump, were also a chance to mend relations. 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House, the two worked on a deal to normalize relations between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE, and the US Embassy was moved to Jerusalem. But Netanyahu was also quick to congratulate President Biden after he won the 2020 election, angering Trump. US officials and Trump have called for Netanyahu to finish the war with Hamas quickly and have cited how bad it is for him on a global stage.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance to the people of Gaza. Addressing a Security Council meeting on Friday, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in the enclave said the current conditions on the ground are making their work extremely difficult. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports from UN headquarters in New York.
In yet another Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza, the United Nations on Friday pleaded for the war to come to an end. It says given the current conditions on the ground, the UN is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance, let alone scale up its operations. Over the last few weeks, several UN humanitarian convoys have been caught in crossfires. Council members all agree that humanitarian workers must be protected. The United States, however, added that Hamas's actions put humanitarian personnel at risk and that it could all end if Hamas accepted the ceasefire agreement on the table.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. We're back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Check out the show streaming live Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on Rockfin, Rumble, my Twitter/X, which is @GardGoldsmith, and on YouTube. And of course, always check out my Substack, the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, for big news and big libertarian news that you might want to discover. I hope you'll join us over there and offer your comments as well. Thanks for listening to Liberty Conspiracy. Okay, so let's get back to some of the people who work in his legacy. It says here, of course, after announcing his withdrawal from the U.S. presidential election race on Sunday, Biden endorsed Harris, his running mate, to replace him on the ballot. His campaign committee quickly filed paperwork with the FEC for the campaign to be redesignated as Harris for president. Survey says can't do that. According to the Washington Post, Democrat lawyers and operatives have argued that installing Harris as the nominee was the easiest solution for the party, as her name is already on the paperwork. But not for president, guys. And the money was raised for Harris alongside Biden, was it? Meaning that she is allowed to use it. As of the end of June, the Biden campaign reported having $95 million in its coffers. Another option under the campaign legislation would be to refund the money to donors That's probably what they're going to have to do. Any new presidential candidates would have to launch their fundraising campaigns from scratch, as just over 3 months are left until the election. According to GOP-aligned campaign finance lawyers, and you know how much I love the GOP. Who's the good GOP? Oh, you are. Oh, goody, goody. The Biden campaign does not have the legal authority to appoint Harris and give her control of the funds. The step, quote, is all but certain to be challenged before the FEC or in court, they argued. Prominent GOP campaign finance lawyer Charlie Spies, otherwise known as Spies, told the publication that both Biden and Harris would have to have been officially nominated by the Democrat Party at its convention next month before any kind of funding handoff could occur. So it sort of gets into the weeds. I have a feeling that even though I think the Republicans have a pretty good argument, the SEC is going to find in favor of Biden. I don't know why. Call me cynical, but I think that's probably what's going to occur. Just, you know, as the Asian Dub Foundation might say, who runs this place? I don't know. Why do we have to have one person running the place? So that's a little bit about the Harris-Biden situation, and a lot more speculation about, you know, how long Biden could stay in. I was listening to Redacted today. There are reports that his health is really bad. So I don't know. And all I can say is, Lady Macbeth, you're going to have to ask a lot of forgiveness of God. And, you know, Biden himself, you know, massive war criminal and so on. But supposedly for a loving wife to put your husband through that, just, you know, I mean, look, we're all on the outside looking in, obviously, right? But it just doesn't, it doesn't rub me the right way. That's for darn sure. It's really, really strange. Now, on the Kamala Harris front, however, and I use that intentionally, sort of like the Who, Eminence front. It's a put on. It's a put on. It's a put on. Let's talk a little bit about her ethics and morality. First of all, this also ties into the tariff story. And so I want to do that before we get into the bullet and the analysis of what the photographer had to say and the Secret Service stuff with Trump, even though that is really fresh ground and it is intense stuff to look at. And I think it's very revealing. And I do think that there are some very appropriate questions that should be directed to the photographer in particular. And we'll play that because I want to get your feedback on this. I want to make sure I have the right impression on this, that my fact points are correct as I go through it. So I do want to mention, however, that Kamala Harris using the Biden campaign funds is not the least of the worries for these people. Of course, she's not very well liked. Polls already show that she's not doing well in certain, battleground states and all that other stuff, whatever. I'm looking at hypocrisy, policies, and things like that. So as many people who watched J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and saw their tariff policy proposals know, the Biden administration has also been terrible on tariffs. They're all trying to cater to so-called American workers and supposedly saving American jobs, overlooking economics, what most economics professors could tell you in about 2 seconds, that tariffs are bad for consumers. They're bad for economic growth. They're a drag, and they're just another way to add burdens of expenses to businesses. Because not only are we, the consumers, looking for better buys, the people who are domestic manufacturers also probably get stuff from overseas, right? So it's just bad mojo. It's arrogant. It's elitist. It's immoral. It is constitutional, but it's immoral. Okay. It is somebody saying you can't buy that unless you pay more, right? So if, for example, the 1934 Firearms Act was an immoral and unconstitutional act, but just an immoral act because, of course, they're telling people who want to buy machine guns or silencers or sawed-off shotguns, you can't buy it unless you pay this massive tax first, that breaching the Second Amendment because it's an infringement, saying your ability to buy this is contingent on paying off the mafia. Well, then how is it not immoral to say you can't buy this other thing, whether it's a spring for something you're building and you're getting it from, Chile or Mexico or something like that, or China? How is that any different? How is that moral to impose oneself? Obviously, it's not. Well, the folks who are behind the tariffs don't want people to know a lot of information. And they'll often cite, for example, well, the Chinese are using slave labor, implying that there's a policing aspect of this, that your neighbor shouldn't be free to decide for him or herself what he or she wants to buy, to be able to look into something. There should be the machine run by politics, gamed by American companies that want favoritism to block foreign goods. The machine, the political machine, full of tax money demanded from people, they will decide, and it'll be all lily white and clean, and it'll be much more honest than your neighbor deciding for himself and looking into products, right? And that can apply to checking on slave labor, or checking to see if it maybe is grown from local farms, or maybe it's somebody in your state, you want to buy something local. It should be up to you, whatever the gradation is on your ethics and your moral choices, right? And they might describe it as, well, you're receiving stolen goods. It's on the back of slave labor. Okay, well, so is the government. So the government telling you that you can't buy something because that might be from the backs of slave labor is a bit hypocritical, isn't it? And the way you can tell is saying, thank you very much for your advice. I'd rather not pay you anymore. And then you can see the moral QED, right? The circular logic of it, the circular morality of it. But when it comes to the slave labor of Chinese prisoners, I did bring up last week that there are lots and lots of stories out there about corporations that make oodles of money off of American prison labor. Now, maybe to the degree of the Chinese, it's not comparable. I don't know. But if you do a quick search inside Bing, inside Presearch, inside Google, do your comparisons. Here are some examples that you'll see. Over 4,100 companies in the United States profit from mass incarceration in the U.S. These companies either support prison labor directly or through their supply chains. Some major corporations that use prison labor include Walmart, AT&T, McDonald's, Victoria's Secret, BP, Bank of America, Starbucks, and Microsoft. And of course, we all know that Microsoft is also dirty in many other ways. Starbucks also, Bank of America also, BP also, Victoria's Secret also, hello, Jeffrey Epstein, and others like AT&T, which was given a monopoly for telephonic phone service in World War I that was only broken up in the 80s. So, and Walmart, of course. So, yeah, a lot of corruption there, a lot of dirtiness, right? What about Kamala Harris, and what about other stories of prison labor? Well, first, let's hit the Kamala Harris story, and then we'll backtrack back into the prison labor stuff, okay? She has very dirty hands when it comes to this stuff. Just as dirty as what she was doing to mothers, single mothers who had truant kids, and she threatened to imprison the mothers if they were truant more than 3 times in the California school system. Just like her hypocrisy, trying to imprison people for smoking pot, but then she tells, who was it? I can't remember who it was, Charlemagne the God, that she inhaled, just like Bill Clinton, and she laughs about it. Laughs about both of those things, threatening the parents and about smoking. At the same time, she was a high-up prosecutor in California trying to put these people in jail for a victimless crime. Well, you'll see the headline, and if you're listening in audio, I'll read it for you here. Kamala Harris' office sought to keep inmates locked up so that California could use them for cheap labor. So if you hear her talking about stopping Chinese products, and in addition to the canard about saving American jobs, not looking at the savings consumers should be able to retain of their own free will to spend on other products that can grow the economy and start up new jobs. If you hear her talking about Chinese slave labor, maybe bring this up on the hustings. John Gage wrote this in 2019. Lawyers under the oversight of then Attorney General of California, Kamala Harris, argued in 2014 against the release of nonviolent criminals because they wanted to keep them for cheap labor. Extending 2-for-1 credits to all minimum custody inmates at this time would severely impact fire camp participation, a dangerous outcome when California is in the middle of a difficult fire season and severe drought, lawyers from Harris's office wrote in a filing. And of course, that ties in what I've mentioned here many times before. The government-run lands, they rent that land to PG&E, That's, Pacific Gas and, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric out in California, which still has the wholesale monopoly on most of the state for the production of electricity. They run their power lines over government-run lands. They don't take care of the land's property. And you can see they even go so cheap as to use prison labor to put them out there. The Attorney General arrived at that stance in reaction to a chain of events following a 2011 Supreme Court decision ruling to be redundant, that California's prison overcrowding situation was in violation of the Constitution's cruel and unusual punishment clause. In 2014, as overcrowding persisted, a 3-judge panel in California ordered the state to make eligible for parole nonviolent prisoners with only 2 felonies who had served half their sentences. Harris's lawyers argued early release would harm the prison's labor program. Not that it might put people in danger, of course, because these were nonviolent criminals, that it would harm the prison labor program, which included its work program to help fight California's wildfires. And that's not all. Criticism against Harris resurfaced after her announcement for president last month brought heightened scrutiny. In 2014, Harris told BuzzFeed News she was shocked to learn about what her lawyers were arguing in court. Harris's presidential campaign reiterated her claims this week to the Daily Beast. Quote, as she said at the time, Senator Harris was shocked and troubled by the use of this argument. She looked into it and directed the department's attorneys not to make that argument again. Okay, who's in charge? Who runs this place? Yeah. Now, inside my Substack and inside my Subscribestar will be an additional piece on corporate accountability. I'll just show you this one real quick. This comes from corporateaccountability.org. They have 2 pieces on this. This came out August 5th, 2020. Private companies producing with U.S. prison labor in 2020. Prison labor in the U.S. Part 2. This is a massive piece. Overview of current forms of prison labor in the United States. In-house prison labor. In-house work is the most common and involves work within correctional facilities, including assignments in food service, cleaning, laundry, groundskeeping, maintenance, and custodial services. So a lot of times to save money rather than hiring people, they get the prisoners to do that. Okay. However, around 63,000 inmates in the United States in 2019 to 2020, produce goods for external use. Some of these goods are destined for government agencies and some for the private market. Remember this when you hear criticism of Chinese prison labor. Prison industries jobs range from farm work and manufacturing to call center and distribution services. Every state except for Alaska has a state-governed prison industries initiative, and the federal government runs a separate program, Federal Prison Industries, trading as Unicor on the stock market. It's just amazing. Now, here's a little something about immigrants in detention. Like pretrial defendants, civil detainees cannot be forced to work under the 13th Amendment loophole allowing slavery as a punishment for crime, as they have not been convicted of a crime. It's supposed to be abolishing slavery as a punishment for crime. However, federal immigration detention centers rely on the labor of civil immigrant detainees to lower their operating costs. The large prison corporations running the centers, like Core Civic and Geo Group, are currently facing lawsuits alleging that they employ deprivation schemes where detained immigrants are forced to choose between living without basic necessities or working for sub-minimum wages, and then are threatened with punishment for refusing to work. And there's a lot more. So I'll make sure that that's posted out there for you and in a concise way, a very easy way for you to find it over at Substack. And it'll be separate from the audio post tonight at Substack. It'll be separate just for the paying people at Substack and for the Subscribestar folks. I haven't even been back in the Subscribestar. I got to make sure I can do that tonight. I don't want to speak too much on it. There's also another piece that I will forward to you, and it's about PBS and their party to it. PBS covering the Prisoners Party to it as well. So that is a big deal. Now let's get into, again, before we go into the bullet photography and the Secret Service, let's go into a couple very good points about tariffs, opening up the classroom here and letting you all gather in, offer your comments to me as well. As I mentioned to the students in my ethics and economics classes, I said, just because I'm in front of the board, like I'm the dude on the screen, doesn't mean that you all don't have great skills in something you've researched. And I said to the students, I have an advantage of time over you, but you might have an advantage over me on something that you've done, like fly fishing or, working on your cars or whatever. Maybe you're really good at those things. You could probably get up and teach a class on those, So, offer your thoughts on these things. Here is James Bovard talking about the economic and moral realities of tariffs. This comes from the Libertarian Institute. And just wait for it to pop up here. Get rid of that one. And, there's Ron. Thanks, Ron. So here it is. Tariffs are bipartisan enemies of freedom. This was out on July 17th. Maybe, just maybe, a guy like James Bovard is aware of what the Republicans are going to be arguing. I think that's true. So there it is. The devil's face made of trade war politics, economic trade wars, and, of course, the class envy stuff, that sort of thing. Playing for the unions. We saw that at the Republican Party gathering, didn't we? Oh, we sure did. Well, here's the story. James Bovard writes, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump both portray tariffs as magic wands to create national prosperity. Trump is calling for a 10% across-the-board tariff on imports, and of course, 60%, that's all imports, and 60% on Chinese goods, while Biden is imposing selective tariffs that he portrays as miracle cures for any economic malaise. But tariffs have always been and always will be an enemy to prosperity and individual freedom. The U.S. tariff code is the accumulated junk heap of centuries of political payoffs and kickbacks. In 1790, the tariff code consisted of a single sheet of rates posted at a U.S. customs house. Now, our tariff code occupies 2 hefty volumes with more than 8,000 different rates, a blizzard of arbitrary discriminations against and among products. Tariffs, and so you can bet that every one of those things has somebody trying to back it to game that system. Tariffs are not merely a slight nuisance imposed by government clerks at the national borders. Economist Henry George observed in 1886, quote, protective tariffs are as much applications of force as are blockading squadrons. The difference between the two is that blockading squadrons are a means whereby nations seek to prevent their enemies from trading. Protective tariffs are a means whereby nations attempt to prevent their own people from trading. End quote. Tariffs are coercive in the same way that a sales tax is coercive. In 1956, the Joint Economic Committee of Congress declared, quote, for a government official to make a moral judgment on how we ought to spend our money is an invasion of liberty and privacy, which is acceptable only where obvious public harm follows. Well, we know the harm comes from the agency that declares it's knowing what the public interest is, the government. And he finishes the quote, James Bovard writes, if one wishes to avoid being coerced by tariffs, one could simply abstain from buying orange juice, clothing, automobiles, machinery, medicine, shoes, and more. But since few Americans can realistically choose to live in the mountains in a thatched hut on a diet of nuts and berries, people have no choice but to submit to the surcharges and dictates of American trade policymakers. Every trade barrier undermines the productivity of capital and labor throughout the economy. A 1984 Federal Trade Commission study estimated that tariffs cost the American economy $8 for every $1 of adjustment costs saved. You've probably heard me mention that before because it's in James Bovard's great book, The Fair Trade Fraud, which is now 25 years old. Restrictions on clothing and textile imports cost consumers $1 for each 1 cent of increased earnings for American textile and clothing workers, according to the London-based Trade Policy Research Center. Tariffs are either a bailout to perpetuate uncompetitive American industries or a license for efficient American industries to gouge their consumers. Trade is an issue not simply of exchanging widgets for gadgets, but of how people live their daily lives. Since practically no one can make all the things he wears, eats, and uses, a person's living standard and opportunity in life depend largely on his opportunities for trading the product of his labor with the products of other people's labor. Pervasive trade barriers effectively force people to use inferior building blocks for their life. Trade barriers are an attempt by politicians to control the market. Central control, command and control, the essential versus non-essential argument that so many conservatives found absolutely deplorable, and yet they wrap their arms about it at the GOP convention. Again, I don't understand this bipolar problem for many in the GOP. Writes James Bovard, the politician, and by the way, again, if somebody thinks that they know what great industries are the most important, that they've got to have the politicians threaten people so that they have to make sure they buy only from those American industries, that they're perpetuated by government force, then they're in favor of central planning. It's their central planning that is the preferred central planning. That's no different than what Mao's mindset was like, or Stalin's mindset, or Lenin's mindset, the mindset of North Korea, the mindset of the Japanese government in the 80s as they drove it into the ground, pushing for chip manufacturing, and they chose the wrong railroad tracks for that one. It's just bad ideas. The market is very important, morally and economically, of course. Politicians cannot control the market without commanding everyone who must rely on that market. Writes James Bovard, if the government prohibited Americans from corresponding with citizens in the rest of the world, no one would deny that citizens' liberties had been trampled. Totalitarian regimes do not directly intervene to prohibit each of their subjects from reading foreign books. Instead, they simply seek to prohibit all unapproved foreign books from entering the nation. What's the difference, in principle, between prohibiting entry of almost all foreign books and the U.S. import quotas that prohibit the entry of almost all foreign ice cream, peanuts, butter, and dry milk until recent decades? Freedom of choice is as important in how one lives as in what one reads. And there's a lot more. I'll just finish with this. Protectionism means robbing Peter to pay Paul, or more accurately, robbing 1,000 Peters to pay one Paul. Oswald Garrison Villiard, the editor of The Nation, observed in 1947, quote, every citizen who has sufficient influence to get Congress to interfere with natural trade laws by creating a tariff dam across the currents of international trade becomes a price dictator to all his fellow citizens. There's plenty more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live.
Avoid an unpleasant surprise at checkout. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. You scored a great hotel rate online, but Mike, a frequent business traveler, warns about hidden fees. Some are mandatory, but others may only apply if you use certain services. If you don't expect to take advantage of the amenities a fee covers, try asking the hotel to remove it. And to duck that pricey daily Wi-Fi charge, use the personal hotspot feature on your smartphone. Before you book, Mike recommends resortfeechecker.com. Also on our blog, Anne Marie says she has sold lots of books that were gathering dust on Amazon. She says she still browses in bookstores, then buys used copies on Amazon if she can't find what she's looking for at the library. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 2 up next after the news, here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Former US President Barack Obama and his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, have given their official endorsement to Kamala Harris for president. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
In a phone call that was posted on Kamala Harris's social media channels, Barack Obama tells Harris, "We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office." Then, in a later statement, the couple said they would do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Since Harris's elevation to becoming the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee, Barack and Michelle Obama had held back from any endorsement of Harris, as many prominent Democrats offered their support. Barack Obama has cast himself as an impartial elder statesman of the party, not wanting to become too involved in the process of choosing a candidate himself. Meanwhile, it's been reported this morning by US media that Kamala Harris is hoping to have chosen a running mate to be her vice presidential candidate by the 7th of August.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with former US President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida home on Friday to get support for Israel's fight against Hamas. The two last met in person 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House. FSN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has met with multiple US leaders and officials this week, pushing for continued Washington support. The latest talks between Netanyahu and a Republican candidate for president, Donald Trump, were also a chance to mend relations. 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House, the two worked on a deal to normalize relations between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE, and the US Embassy was moved to Jerusalem. But Netanyahu was also quick to congratulate President Biden after he won the 2020 election, angering Trump. US officials and Trump have called for Netanyahu to finish the war with Hamas quickly and has cited how bad it is for him on a global stage.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance to the people of Gaza. Addressing a Security Council meeting on Friday, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in the enclave said the current conditions on the ground are making their work extremely difficult. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports from UN headquarters in New York.
In yet another Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza, the United Nations on Friday pleaded for the war to come to an end. It says, given the current conditions on the ground, the UN is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance, let alone scale up its operations. Over the last few weeks, several UN humanitarian convoys have been caught in crossfires. Council members all agree that humanitarian workers must be protected. The United States, however, added that Hamas's actions put humanitarian personnel at risk and that it could all end if Hamas accepted the ceasefire agreement on the table.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. Two of the most notorious Mexican drug lords have been arrested in Texas. Sinaloa cartel co-founder Ishmael El Mayo Zambada Garcia and the son of the jailed boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman were allegedly tricked into boarding a plane to the United States. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the two men face multiple charges, including for the production and distribution of fentanyl into America. The Sinaloa cartel is considered one of the world's most powerful. Zambada co-founded it several decades ago with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was jailed following a trial in New York in 2019 and is now serving a life sentence plus 30 years. The French rail network has been hit by a series of arson attacks, causing major disruption as the Olympic Games gets underway. Other countries have also been impacted, with Belgian authorities conducting a series of counter-terror raids. Several people were detained on suspicion of participating in the activities of a terrorist group. FSN's Alex Carrier reports from Brussels.
7 individuals were detained during 14 raids across Belgium overnight. They will now be questioned by Belgian law enforcement, suspected of planning terrorist activities. The country's federal prosecutor said the suspects' exact motives were still being established and made no official link to the Olympics. But French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin thanked Belgian law enforcement for leading a judicial operation to protect us, hinting at a potential link to the opening ceremony. Dozens of Belgian police officers, sniffer dogs and anti-drone teams have also been deployed to Paris to assist French authorities with the massive security operation.
Bangladesh has begun relaxing a week-long curfew, but security agencies warn that it could be reimposed in the event of fresh clashes. Local reports have put the death toll from violence between police and protesting students at over 200. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. This week, mothers across the nation invented a new drug to worry about, confirming that the completely fictitious new substance was appearing in schoolyards across the nation and is easily created from simple household products like sugar, window cleaner, and petroleum jelly. Calling the totally made-up narcotic Scramp, mothers in desperate need of something to fret over deluded themselves into constantly agonizing over the widespread drug epidemic that exists solely in their minds.
My son sits in his room for hours and hours. It must be Scramp. He's a Scramp head. I bet they'll figure out how to scramp with this too.
In other news, a man confidently strides through a beaded curtain without parting it. A father takes a picture of his daughter every day from birth until he abandons his family. And the same homeless man is always begging for change on the same United flight. Stalled contract negotiations have prevented me from reviewing any more news until I receive a co-producer credit. But for more, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. We're back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live, continuing our exploration into the realities of tariffs, both morally and economically. Thanks for listening, one and all. And again, I think it's important to note that there are massive burdens on many American businesses that make them less competitive than if those businesses were to be operating in other countries. But the answer is not to make consumers have to spend even more just to stay afloat. That is not right. You don't poison the already pummeled patient. You help them get better. And of course, it's the government that pummels. There's so much more, and I'll just mention this. Don't forget, imagine if you've got a buying buddy, and everywhere you go, the buying buddy helps you get a better deal. Whether it's you're going to go into a place and go as a worker, and the buying buddy is going to get you more per hour, or you're going to go in and you're going to get something for less money, and the buying buddy is going to force the person to sell under his costs, right? Whatever it is, buying buddy. That force is immoral, whatever it is. If it is force, if it is done through aggression, right? And I'm not talking negotiation. It's your buying buddy. He's a thug. He's a mafia thug. And then imagine what happens if that's turned on you. Because the buying buddy is under the control of the government. That's who he's really the buddy of. To leave a preposition dangling. So excellent stuff from James Bovard. And I also want to add this to it. More lessons on free trade. This one comes to us from EconLib. This is almost strictly something that economists read. And it's very good. You know, David Henderson, I've read some stuff from David here. But here we go. This is Donald Boudreaux, and he's very well known among libertarians. International trade, it is commonly said, has winners and losers. Consumers in the U.S. gain when they buy wine imported from France, while winemakers in California lose. C'est la vie, counsel economists. Nothing should be done about this situation. The reason is that it's also commonly said, at least among those of us in the economic know, that the winner's gains from free international trade are easily shown to exceed the loser's losses, thus making trade efficient. Otherwise, why engage in the trade? Economists call this outcome the Kaldor-Hicks efficiency, because the winner's gains exceed the loser's losses. The winners could, in principle, fully compensate the losers, wiping out the losses while still leaving net gains for the winners. Therefore, even without actual compensation of the losers, free trade makes society as a whole better off, despite the fact that some individuals suffer net losses. And the key there is the net gains, because in the aggregate, as James Bovard mentioned, the net gains are much greater when you aggregate all the consumers out there. And that is money that can't be used to start up new businesses and apply it to more efficient businesses that are out there when people have to keep shelling out more just to stay afloat. So very important stuff. And the last thing I'll mention is a lot of people will talk about the so-called trade deficit. And I've mentioned this before, and I've got it in the book that David Henderson edited, and he gave me his copy at an IHS seminar one time at Bryn Mawr College years ago. So the trade deficit, typically, when you hear about this in the news, they'll discuss the trade deficit as being, well, Americans bought X number more products from China than the Chinese bought from the Americans. And that's not fair. That's a trade imbalance. That's a trade deficit. Okay, so the very term trade deficit is an oxymoron. It's trade. You don't have a deficit when you trade, okay? That ought to tell people something, okay? It ought to tell them that either the people who are saying these things don't know what they're talking about, or they do know what they're talking about and they have ulterior motives, very sinister motives for their own promotion. Very clear. And this is just hardcore economics and ethics talking. This is what I would tell the students in my class. And it's, believe me, if you want to get into a debate with somebody about this, and you want to use these, you're not going to lose the debate. You'll destroy your opponent. It's just the way that it works, because this is just fundamental economics. So it's always a balance of trade. That's what trades are. They're always a balance. And if you macro it to the aggregate level, what happens is, and I've mentioned this before, when a nation state's currency, even a fiat currency, is relatively stronger than another nation state's currency, that then incentivizes people to utilize that currency to buy stuff from that other nation state, because it will buy relatively more of that stuff from that other place. That's not bad. That's okay. Like if you want to go to England, when do you want to go to England? When your dollar will buy less or when your dollar will buy more? If you say, I want to go when my dollar buys more, sounds very sensible to me. And you shouldn't be accused of somehow engaging in some nefarious backwards trades or trade policy, some selfish trade policy. Why? Because even though people would say, well, you're buying more British goods over there, that's a trade deficit, you're getting more stuff. The other part of it is that it's always called the balance of trade. Economists know that the so-called trade deficit is in goods and services. It's not in liquidity. You actually get a trade surplus in liquidity. Why? Because the dollars that are going over there and are bringing back the goods that the pop media labels a trade deficit, because they're not buying as many of our goods as we're buying of their goods, and so on and so forth, as if they're just giant things. It's not people to people or company to company purchases, right? I don't have the right to tell somebody anyway. But if we're looking at the consequentialist economics of it, let's just focus on that part of it, okay? So that money that is used to buy those products goes over to those countries, and it doesn't transmogrify into yen or yuan or francs or anything like that, right? Rubles or anything, right? It stays dollars or Federal Reserve notes, which are rapidly depreciating in their buying power, which is why many people don't want to use them anymore. So they stay those dollars, but if they're relatively stronger than other nation states, those dollars, and especially if the economy is very good and productivity is very strong in the nation state with that strong money, which is typically why it's seen as very valuable, because it reflects productivity, right? So if the economy is productive, those dollars come back in the form of liquidity, liquid investments, leveraging them through private use, not the Fed creating the money, which already has happened, but we'll just imagine private decisions saying, I see some good opportunities back in the United States. We got to do something with this money. It always comes back. So in the end, just like the term trade deficit is not right, you always do get a trade balance. It's the balance of trade. So for all the deficit you hear about in the news, and that's the only part you'll ever hear, I'm telling you, unless you want to dig down and read economics journals and stuff like that, you're never going to hear about the balance of trade. You're never going to hear about the other half of it. Why? Because they don't want you to hear about it. They want to play your emotions. They want to play the nativism. That's why the unions do so well with this stuff. That's one of the, Pat Buchanan knew very, very well. As much as he was a great guy, he knew very well that there was a balance of trade, right? But when he was running for office, he got very involved with trying to get automaker support and so on. And he argued the argument of certain industries are very important for the United States and so on and so forth. Again, taking on that elitist position of I can tell what is important for the economy. Well, that's central planning. And that goes back to his errors in the Nixon administration. He still was making some mistakes, as good as he was on many, many other items, right? Many other issues. These are the fundamental basic economics of things. And you can't get around it, right? And when they impose these tariffs on foreign countries, they don't respond typically by lowering their tariffs. Just watch the second trio of Star Wars movies, because the war that was started artificially by political parties like Senator Palpatine. They put up trade barriers against these aliens to stop them from trading. They were tariffs. That led to real kinetic war inside the Galactic Senate, which is then they gave more power to Senator Palpatine and put him in charge. So, life follows art follows life, whatever. There you go. Just ask Senator Palpatine. All right. So let the force flow. Yes, the dark side. So some quick lessons on the tariff issue, especially coming after what we heard from J.D. Vance about his Chinese stuff. We played those clips last week. And just let me know, by the way, folks, if I do have time once a week, maybe what I could do is I might be able to post inside Substack, and I don't know if I can do it inside Subscribestar, little clips that could be really good clips for your access, almost like a clip library of different things for that week or whatever. And I'll see. I don't know how I could sort of do it under subject, but we'll see if I can figure out a way to do that. So you can always have access to these things. They're fairly easy to find if you know the terminology. J.D. Vance, Chinese tariffs, or whatever. Maybe you'll be able to find somebody who's isolated that. But I could isolate these things based on these topics that we discuss. It just depends how much time I've got and whether it's worth your time, that sort of thing. So hopefully this has been a good overview of this thing, and a scholarly approach and a fair approach, I hope. People I really like are very much in favor of tariffs. But it's a very interesting branch of economics, or part of the economics studies, to look at that. And James Bovard is just one of the stars on that. And again, he got the background information on this by sneaking a document that was not supposed to be taken out of a building. It was this giant, like 500 or 1,000 page thing that was sitting on a table as he was leaving a government building. And he's like, what's this? And he actually stuffed it like under his shirt, and he walked out with it. And then he wrote the Fair Trade Fraud, because he was amazed to discover all of the things that the government makes more expensive for consumers and for American manufacturers, which then, of course, has a bearing on what consumers can get. So I see Emmy Moore, who runs this place. If you really want to know, it's BB. BB gun, that's for darn sure, right? Yeah, we're going to get into a couple big items, actually, about Bibi Netanyahu and about war in just a minute, everybody. Feel free to drop your comments. Just want to make sure I've got everything covered here, that we are on schedule for the show right now. Yeah, we talked a little bit about Harris. We talked about the corporate accountability with the treachery of Harris in California and the prison labor. We talked about the lessons of free trade, the morality of it. Now, let's get into a couple other quick items, everybody. Let's talk about some... well, do I really want to hit this one? Yeah, I think we want to hit this one. All right, everybody. Let's talk a little bit about the court system. Let's go into a story that I think you might find interesting, not necessarily the biggest breaking news, and then we'll start opening up the lines to you about this Trump bullet thing. But first, a real quick one. This one's coming from Colorado, and I have another court story for you. And in fact, we could have played this theme for Harris and the GOP and that money. like that. Wouldn't that have been cool if that was like Harry James on the trumpet or something like that? One of the James brothers. Man, can't go wrong with that theme. I love that theme. Good stuff. Perfectly timed, too. What a terrific, terrific theme. All right. So there is a very interesting story that I think is pretty important to bring up. A judge in Colorado and homelessness and Little Leviathan. So let's, again, talking about economics and the way the system can be gamed. This story came to me from The Guardian, of all things, and it's actually less than a day old. I thought, I want to present this to the audience today. Here it is. Federal judge sides with church in unhoused shelter standoff. Now, I wonder how this judge would have ruled on, say lockdowns for people going into the church, right? But here it is. It has something to do with zoning. A federal judge has ruled that a Colorado gold rush town cannot prevent an evangelical church from providing temporary shelter to unhoused people on the church's property. Now, you notice how they have the definers in there, evangelical and church and Gold Rush Town. Gold Rush Town, not really that important, but the evangelical church part of it. Here's a question for you. Why should there be a distinction between the property owned by the church and your property if you want people to come on there? If you want to build on your property, why should there be zoning that tells you you can't do it a priori? You're not even going to harm anybody, right? Why should it be prevented beforehand by government people who demand your money and set up all these rules, restricting your ability to own and run your own property? You should be able to use your property as you desire unless and until you harm someone else. They put these things up claiming, well, we've got to have these barriers up just in case. We don't want anything bad to happen. Well, you're already making something bad happen by imposing your will on someone else. That's just a king. That's just the feudal lord saying, well, sorry, you're not going to be able to use your land for this purpose. You're going to have to switch it out for something else, right? In a way, again, it's a taking, just as Richard Epstein has mentioned in his book, Takings. It's a form of taking your opportunities away from free people to be able to decide what they do with their property. In this case, we've got a church. The ruling against the town of Castle Rock, Colorado, comes after the Rock Church sued the town for attempting to block it by arguing the church could not park RVs used as residences on site. And of course, they were using local zoning laws. The Rock Church had also claimed that the town had violated the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act because its religious beliefs compel it to run a makeshift homeless shelter to, quote, restore the poor, needy, and destitute. The ruling represents at least a temporary victory for religious organizations attempting to tackle the country's increasing rates of homelessness exacerbated by rising housing costs, but facing opposition from local authorities and law enforcement. The Rock had claimed that under zoning laws, the town attempted to prohibit it from providing shelter for people experiencing temporary homelessness. According to the complaint, as of November 2021, there were 2 campers on the property, and that from 2019 to late 2023, recreational vehicle campers had been, quote, used on an occasional basis to provide overnight shelter for certain temporarily shelter-challenged persons. There's a nice euphemism, homeless people, participating in the church's compassionate care programs. In a response, the church claimed that persons are protected from land regulations that impose substantial burden on a person's free exercise of religion. The town, it said, does not have the right to tell the church which vehicles can be parked on its private lot, how long they can be parked there, and whether someone can sit, stand, eat, or sleep in such a vehicle. Researchers at Harvard University recently produced a study, America's Rental Housing 2024, showing that half of all U.S. renters were cost-burdened by rents and could no longer afford their monthly bills. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you could get more rental properties? What stops that? Oh, that's right, zoning. So there you go. That's a little bit of something that I thought you might find interesting. And of course, we could have even used that legal theme for the Kamala Harris story. That's a big one. But when we talk about security, these security forces, right? If you turn to my Sunday News Assembly, you'll see that inside the Sunday News Assembly is a video link to something that I want to open up to you. We're going to talk about the Trump shooting. And in order to do that, I want to make sure that I refer you to a clip that I saw within a Viva Frei video as Viva Frei was talking with Michael Yon. It was very interesting, actually, and you'll see the whole thing linked inside my Substack for the Sunday News Assembly. But down towards the bottom, you'll see of the 22 stories, there are 22 stories there, like a big, tall building. We have terrorists are bipartisan enemies to freedom, that the James Bovard piece. Then I have here's Viva Frei with Michael Yon. Michael is a world-traveled war correspondent, former soldier, and a man who has some valuable thoughts on the mystery behind the photo of the bullet flying behind Trump in Pennsylvania. So that opens up a lot of questions. Going to leave that hanging for just a minute, and we'll dive into that in a second, showing the actual interview between the photographer, that AP photographer, and Andrea Mitchell from NBC, wife of Alan Greenspan. And I used to, like I said, I used to see Andrea Mitchell just darting around all over the place when I was doing my journalism internship. And she is a tiny person, but she moves fast. She moves fast. Just ask Alan Greenspan. So anyway, it's very interesting because if we look at what's been happening on Capitol Hill, this opens up the wider question of what exactly was the Secret Service doing, right? What was going on as far as the protection? And you probably saw the clip that I played, and before I saw that anybody in Congress was bringing this up, I saw this report. Remember, I talked about this, and they said all of a sudden the Secret Service, after Trump was shot, after all these questions about what happened that day in Pennsylvania, man losing his life, Trump getting hit in the ear, all this mayhem and craziness, the suspect shot but allowed to be there for so long, warned by people, the police warned, all these questions, the rooftop angle and all this nonsense, right? Then you see the head of the Secret Service, this woman Cheadle, at the Republican National Convention, and she's getting, appropriately hunted down and asked questions by people like Marsha Blackburn and so on. Those types of things, they all swirl, as they even promoted this new story a few days after the shooting that there are new reports of Donald Trump being threatened by Iranians. And perhaps you're like me. I thought, this is ridiculous. The Secret Service is announcing a new threat that Donald Trump was threatened. They've got a likely threat from Iranians, right? And I thought to myself, wait a minute. If you look at the story, they said that they knew about that prior to the event in Pennsylvania, which then, of course, just adds logical fuel to the fire, or logical extra 16 tons of weight to the question of, why did you have such a bad security setup if now you're telling us already you knew, you're claiming anyway, that Iran wants to kill, the government of Iran wants to kill Trump? Why was it, if you already knew that, what's going on? So let's go back to our flash stories and play that little bit.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. CBS News has learned U.S. intelligence officials detected an Iranian plot against former President Donald Trump. Two officials confirmed they found out about the threat recently, and it was shared before Trump's rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. But there's no information suggesting the threat was connected to the attempted assassination over the weekend.
Okay, so we'll just stop it there. And by the way, I see Carolyn Rose has brought up a really good point, and I wanted to bring this up, and I'm glad you brought it up, Carolyn, because it slipped my mind. Netanyahu's on his way to the United States right now. Is he going to be meeting with Biden? What's going on? What an absolute mess. We'll be back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Thanks for listening.
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join today.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Former US President Barack Obama and his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, have given their official endorsement to Kamala Harris for president. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
In a phone call that was posted on Kamala Harris's social media channels, Barack Obama tells Harris, "We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office." Then, in a later statement, the couple said they would do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Since Harris's elevation to becoming the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee, Barack and Michelle Obama had held back from any endorsement of Harris, as many prominent Democrats offered their support. Barack Obama has cast himself as an impartial elder statesman of the party, not wanting to become too involved in the process of choosing a candidate himself. Meanwhile, it's been reported this morning by US media that Kamala Harris is hoping to have chosen a running mate to be her vice presidential candidate by the 7th of August.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with former US President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida home on Friday to get support for Israel's fight against Hamas. The two last met in person 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House. FSN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has met with multiple US leaders and officials this week, pushing for continued Washington support. The latest talks between Netanyahu and the Republican candidate for president, Donald Trump, were also a chance to mend relations. 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House, the two worked on a deal to normalize relations between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE, and the US Embassy was moved to Jerusalem. But Netanyahu was also quick to congratulate President Biden after he won the 2020 election, angering Trump. US officials and Trump have called for Netanyahu to finish the war with Hamas quickly and has cited how bad it is for him on a global stage.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance to the people of Gaza. Addressing a Security Council meeting on Friday, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in the enclave said the current conditions on the ground are making their work extremely difficult. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports from UN headquarters in New York.
In yet another Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza, the United Nations on Friday pleaded for the war to come to an end. It says given the current conditions on the ground, the UN is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance, let alone scale up its operations. Over the last few weeks, several UN humanitarian convoys have been caught in crossfires. Council members all agree that humanitarian workers must be protected. The United States, however, added that Hamas's actions put humanitarian personnel at risk and that it could all end if Hamas accepted the ceasefire agreement on the table.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. We're back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Check out the show streaming live Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on Rockfin, Rumble, my Twitter/X, which is @GardGoldsmith, and on YouTube. And of course, always check out my Substack, the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, for big news and big libertarian news that you might want to discover. I hope you'll join us over there and offer your comments as well. Thanks for listening to Liberty Conspiracy. So let's continue with what we saw on the House floor. Here we go.
Director, do you have the ability personally, do you have the authority to beef up security of any of your protectees?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So were you also aware there was a credible threat President Trump was facing? He was facing a heightened security threat to a foreign adversary?
Yes.
Okay. So given that there was an increased threat to President Trump's life, was he provided a full security complement akin to what a sitting U.S. president would receive?
He was provided a full complement of security based on the threat assessment that we had.
That's not my question.
And the venue.
My question is, if he'd been the sitting president, would he have had the same security he had on July 13th, or would have been beefed up?
There is a difference between the sitting president.
So your answer is he didn't.
And continuity of government and the responsibility.
So he did not. Okay, there wasn't a CAT team, full CAT team on site. There wasn't counter surveillance teams on site.
Okay, so his question, I think, is a little bit off. It's not whether Trump was given the same level of protection as a president. It's whether after they make this claim, which I think is a completely fraudulent claim, I've seen nothing to back this up, no information or anything like that. They're claiming that the Trump's takeout of Soleimani was somehow triggering the Iranians to directly go after him over the past few weeks, right? His question should be, did you beef up the security in response to that? Not, did you beef up the security to equal a president? That's not the question. And she's talking about, we did it to reach the threat level. That's not the question. Did you change the security protocols because you claim already that you knew before the Pennsylvania event that an international government plot was afoot to assassinate Donald Trump? Tell us how you changed things and what you did to change things. Give us that information now. Now, she could claim security reasons not to, so on and so forth, but behind closed doors, he could demand that information. That's not what he said. He brought up a really good question, but to me, it's sort of straight away. It's straight away. It's not whether or not you beef up security to match a president. That's not the question. It's whether you beef it up in response to your claim, which I think is a fraudulent claim, that the Iranians were targeting Trump. Okay. So there you go. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. I mean, who can really tell, right? But I'm just saying that they have given us no proof about this. Now, one other item. This is James Comer asking the Secret Service head, Cheadle, some questions, especially about her favorite sloped rooftops.
One of the things that you said, I believe, in an interview, that there wasn't an agent on the roof because it was a sloped roof. Is that normal? And do you fear that immediately creates an opportunity for future would-be assassins to look for a slanted roof? I mean, this is a huge question that every American has. Why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And there have been reports that agents were supposed to be on the roof, but it was hot that day and they didn't want to be on the roof. Can you answer any of those questions, Director?
So I appreciate you asking me that question, Chairman. I should have been more clear in my answer when I spoke about where we placed personnel in that interview. What I can tell you is that there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, and we are still looking into responsibilities and who was going to provide overwatch. But the Secret Service in general, not speaking specifically to this incident, when we are providing overwatch, whether that be through counter snipers or other technology, prefer to have sterile rooftops.
They prefer to have sterile rooftops. Okay. What does she mean by that? A complete non-answer. Complete non-answer. What exactly is she saying? Nothing. She's trying to use some sort of highfalutin terminology to basically not give him an answer. Okay? I think we all get it. I think we get it very well. And by the way, I want to say big thank you to someone who provides a theme that I want to amplify. Anarcho-autonomist inside Rumble says, and this goes towards all the arguments about, and I mentioned this last week, everybody who's looking at this Secret Service thing, again, this is the lesson of collectivism, right? Central planning. Even the so-called fundamental argument of the state existing so that they will provide you with protection from other people, well, that's a protection racket, because if you don't want to pay for that protection, you'll see just how much you're going to get protected and who the real threat is. The state is illegitimate on every moral level, okay? It can't be argued in any other way. It's just illegitimate. But the second part of that is the collective problem, which is the tragedy of the commons, which is I might have an opinion about the way the Secret Service should operate, and somebody else might want to have the sloped roof problem that they operate in a different way, like Cheadle is doing, right? And generally speaking, I think many people this time are saying, this doesn't seem like it was operating really well. There are a lot of bad questions going on here, right? Many questions that we're never going to get. You're never going to get the police footage. You're never going to get the live radios, nothing. They'll say it was for security purposes and so on and so forth, right? They'll do that. So how is that in any way, how does that comport with your interests, right? Well, of course, it's the tragedy of the commons. Everybody's forced to pay for the defense, but the defense can't actually cater to the interests of everybody whom it's supposedly serving. So again, it's a QED, it's a canard, it's fake. It's not real. It's not really your protection because you don't get to choose how you're going to be protected. It's not really Secret Service protection because if it is, we should all have a say in exactly how it operates, which shows you it can't function. Forced collectivism can't function morally and it can't function economically because it eliminates our choices. And Anarcho-Autonomous says, why do we have to have one person running the place? And the key, why do we have a place? Nice. Awesome stuff. Texas Coast South says you could not pay me to go to England. And Texas Coast South Inside Rumble says new green energy roofs coming soon. And Texas Coast South says 100% guard. The state sucks big. Such and such. I know. But hey, I don't want to make any more references to Joe Biden in the shower. So there you go. Anyway, all right. Let's get back into a couple big items and let's start talking about this video clip. I want to get your thoughts on this. Continuing in the Secret Service issue, the attack on Donald Trump, the murder of this man who is a 50-year-old father and retired firefighter. Let's talk about something that I found odd. And if you're watching Grand Theft World, you saw some of this as well. If you saw Viva Fry with Michael Yon live this weekend, then you saw Viva show it to Michael Yon. Michael Yon and they were focusing on the photographer, this AP photographer's claims about, how fast the shutter speed was, what kind of camera he was using, and so on and so forth. And we talked about this basically right after it happened with Jason Barker of Knights of the Storm. He was talking about, if you got a video, how can they shoot it that fast? It's not possible. Here's the rough approximation of the velocity of the bullet by the time it reaches that area. It's still going faster than the speed of sound, all that stuff. So I want to give you my take before I play anything. Okay. So as I mentioned, there are a couple things that are strange. I was in chat inside Grand Theft World. I was in David's chat today as well. And I mentioned this on America Unplugged on Saturday as well on Rockfin at noontime. So this photographer, the same photographer, AP photographer, who took the picture of George W. Bush at the school where he was reading My Pet Goat, and he got the shot of the guy whispering in his ear, about 9/11 attacks. Same guy. People were amazed. He got this shot of the bullet going behind Trump. Okay. And, speculation about whether this was a setup to get Trump. It was a setup to make Trump look good. And, we've heard various people even say that. Even Joy Reid now is a conspiracy theorist on that stuff, right? So whatever it is, there are some very clear, logical things, empirically impossible things, physically impossible things that I heard this photographer say. And I want to check with you to see if what I'm saying comports with what you know, because I don't want to be off base here. But I think there's some major problems with what this guy said. I texted a few people about this. David and I were texting about it yesterday. I just mentioned it to him. And my friend Tom Monteleone, Tom, he's been on the show. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. There are two things. First, this photographer, as you see in my Substack, mentions that once he heard the pops, the moment he heard the pops, he just kept his finger down on the shutter and kept the pics going of his high-speed shutter setting with this high-speed camera. Okay, so there are two things about this statement. Once he heard the pops. Okay, first of all, if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken, that shot that hit Trump was the first shot that guy took. Right? Supposedly Crook atop the roof shot it at Trump. He went like that. That was the first shot. And then he shot some more. And then there was return fire. That was the first shot. So there weren't multiple pops for this photographer to hear. Okay, so if you're a prosecuting attorney, you're saying there's a problem with your testimony, sir. You couldn't have heard multiple pops and then done this. The other thing is the physics of it. The bullet arrives before the sound of the pop. It's going faster than the speed of sound. You don't hear the pop until that bullet goes zinging behind somebody's ear, as you know. So for example, and Tony Arterburn has spoken about this. He spoke a little bit about this in a slightly different way, not addressing this, but talking about hearing bullets go by you. So I did target pulling at a target practice place in southern New Hampshire when I was a kid, and so you're down in a trench. And the targets are in front of you. You're in a sand trench thing, and the people shooting are, hundreds of yards away. They've got their sniper rifles and stuff like that, their scopes, and they're taking target shots, right? Now, you're down below, and I was amazed the first time I ever went down there because you have the target in front of you, and you got your markers. So when you put the targets up, you get back, you're supposed to be shielded, but I was tall, so I was pretty close to the top. Right? There's a little berm, there's cement behind you, and then there's dirt above you. But I was close to the top. You can hear those bullets zinging past you. Zoop, 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 like that. You can hear them. It's crazy. You hear zoop, and then you hear the thoop as it goes into the target. It's messed up. Then you pull it down, you put the markers in, you push back up again so the guys can see where they got their shots, right? So, again, the physics of this tell us that what this man says to Andrea Mitchell is physically impossible. Even if he were to claim, I heard the first pop and started, not possible. You don't hear the gunfire until after the bullet arrives, because the sound of the gunfire is not radiating through the air as fast as a bullet is going, faster than the speed of sound. So there are two big problems with what this guy's saying. So inside my Substack, you'll see that I time-coded this video from Viva Fry. So I'm going to go over to this right now at Rumble. It starts off about 45 seconds before, and there'll be an ad probably here, so don't mind me. I'll put my wonderful visage up here, which survived pulling the targets. And go with it. And then we'll get into the chat because I'd love to get to one. So here it is. This is Viva Fry with Michael Young. Michael Young has experience doing high-speed photography, military photography. 0.15 of a second. Okay, so here we go.
Or something, you know what I mean? Well, and let's hear this, Michael. We'll listen to his explanation, then we're going to dig into it because there's a lot in here.
You were still running and positioning yourself to get more shots. What was the shutter speed on your camera of the photo, that key photo, which captured the bullet? Because the speed of sound is behind the speed of light, so there would have been a lag time there. And so you were just rolling and rolling.
I was. Once I heard the pops, it appears and it surely feels like I held down on the shutter as hard as I could. And I was shooting a Sony A1 camera at an 8,000.
All right, the rest of that's not relevant. It doesn't matter what he was shooting. None of that matters. This is the problem that, unfortunately, Michael and Viva focused on what he was talking about what he was using. It's not what he was using. It's what he said temporally and logically and physically. Everything he just said is not possible. That was the first shot, if I'm not mistaken. So correct me, okay, if I'm off base here. This is a major, major problem. And I mentioned to David, you will never hear this photographer say that again that way. He's going to change what he said. So let me know what you think. And thank you for being one of the viewers over on X. Please recycle the program. Tell folks about the Liberty Conspiracy. If you think it's valuable, please let people know. Our voluminous staff would appreciate that, and the whole conspiracy would appreciate that. So let me know what you think, everybody. And I'm going to go inside Rockfin, inside Rumble. And JB Morrison says, the magic bullet. Yeah. And Jason Barker says, I think it may have been a 300 blackout subsonic round. Interesting. Then we've got over here, Texas Coast South. The picture they show with bullets zooming by is not the first shot. Okay. So what was the first shot? Was the first shot, and this is where I want to make sure I've got this right, was the first shot the one that hit Trump? I believe it was. So let's just check with that. Because I looked over the video, and it does certainly seem like that was the first shot. Right? Taylor Saunders says, there are several things wrong right from the first bullet. So feel free to amplify on that, Taylor. Inside Rockfin is saying, I don't understand how this guy can say this. And again, before I got on here, I thought to myself, okay, I'd like to be more open to this guy and just say, you know, maybe I've got this wrong and so on and so forth. So I wanted to make sure I put that caveat down there. But Andrea Mitchell never follows that up. You know, I would like to know, am I incorrect in thinking that that was the first shot the guy took? He had a bead on Trump's head. He took the shot. How could you have heard pops and then got the shot? How could you have heard the pop before the bullet arrived? Both of those are impossible. So I'll leave that hanging. Taylor says Trump's face was turned too long toward the shot. Well, you know, he was looking at the board thing or whatever, so he's got that excuse or whatever, that sort of thing. And they claim that if he hadn't turned his head, you know, the whole thing. It is his unseen ear, says Taylor. Yep. But don't forget, everybody, of course, you know, there are people behind him with cameras. There are lots of photographers with cameras. There's video coming out from behind that shot as well. So we can't necessarily think that he, you know, didn't have his ear exposed to people seeing him, right? And that's Taylor makes a good point. Came away with very little blood, right? Very little blood, because he even said at the I think it was the Republican convention. You know, I didn't know it bleeds. You know, it's one of the big, you know, most intensely bloody things that you can, you know, break open. Just ask, you know, Evander Holyfield when he was fighting Mike Tyson. He says, well, see, Texas Coast South says that was the picture of the so-called first shot. That does not mean it was the first shot. Yes, that's true. However, this was going out live, and there were so many people who were filming it that you can trace the acoustics of it. That was the first shot from like multiple cameras, right? As far as I know, I shouldn't say it that explicitly, but as far as I know, that was the first shot, right? And if it wasn't the first shot, then people were not reacting or something. You know, they weren't turning their heads because there was another shot. They reacted at that shot as Trump reacted, right? So to me, all that stuff lines up, that was the first shot. We have multiple cameras, video showing it from different people. You know, thousands of people had their cameras going. We've got at least a dozen different sources, private sources. I don't think the government's manipulating all these things. Very clear. That seems to me like it was the first shot. I'm not even talking about, you know, whether or not there was a guy up on the water tower. But I will mention this, if people want to speculate about the water tower thing. Let me get your thoughts on this, too. And Texas Coast, just let me know if you think I'm off base, because I want to get your thoughts on this, too, as I way through this. Everybody. They talk about, there was a figure on the water tower. Okay, I think there are many valid points to be made of why didn't the Secret Service have multiple people stationed on the water tower looking in multiple directions? Because it's the highest vantage point, right? Why didn't they have that? Why didn't they have drones, helicopters, all that stuff, right? Especially with the Iranian threat, right? But second of all, they show the zoom in of a figure moving out and then going back from sight at the very tip top of the tower. Definitely something moving up there. Looks like a human figure standing. Let me ask you this. Those people who are in the military, if you're taking a shot from that far and you're a sniper, are you going to be standing? And again, maybe trying to lay down on that was not going to work. But standing, I just can't imagine if you've got that much variation that's going to erupt with your opening of the angle. I can't imagine standing and introducing that sort of variability to your shot. I mean, maybe leaning against something, using that for support. Maybe somebody's that good that they could do it, if they're employing somebody. But I don't know. It's very strange. So let me go back into Rumble. And Texas Coast says, that was the state-of-the-art blank that Trump got grazed with. I think your thoughts hold weight, Guard, no doubt. But to pull off the world's greatest reality TV magic trick takes a lot of trickery. So, Texas Coast, you would be of the mindset more like Joy Reid might be saying that this is done to support Trump. It wasn't done by deep state people to knock out Trump. As many people think the real story is, that the real story is not this one kid, the patsy on the roof. I think most of us recognize that is pretty darn sketchy, and there's a lot of circumstances that tell us if it was a patsy on the roof, there was either a second shooter or they allowed that guy to get up there. And they probably, to make things sure, they would have had a real second shooter and allowed that guy to become, the patsy like the Kennedy shooting. So you're of the mindset that this was done to promote Trump. Trump is deep state, says Texas Coast. Very, very emphatic, very solid. And we're going to look into some of the background of J.D. Vance in just a minute. David Knight did great work on this. And Whitney Webb's piece on this is phenomenal. We're going to go into some of her conversation with Jimmy Dore, because it was excellent. Jason says, good point, Guard. You would not snipe in a standing position. Even your spotter would not be standing. Secret Service sniper, says Harry Hart. Yeah. Nancy Chambers says magic bullets are what they use to assassinate presidents. And that pretty much sums up our position right now, right, Nancy? Right? But I will say this. I think I'm pretty solid right now on my view. Again, I'm going to review more angles of the video. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But when I heard that photographer, that just ticked me off. First, that Andrea Mitchell, that he would say that. Okay? And second, because it just doesn't comport with physics or anything or the way that it went, right? And then think he can get away with it. Actually be willing to appear on MSNBC with Andrea Mitchell, then be willing to do that knowing that he's got sort of a flimsy sort of statement to say about this. And then to promote this canard that he heard the pops. What was it, the Boston Pops? That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. Not a chance. So anyway, like I said, I'll pull back from that. I would like to talk to this guy to have him explain it. But I don't think he's going to answer the same way. Like I said, I don't think you're ever going to hear this man say that stuff again. We'll be back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Remember to listen to us live on Rumble, on Rockfin, on YouTube, and on my Twitter/X at Guard Goldsmith every Monday through Friday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 3 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Former US President Barack Obama and his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, have given their official endorsement to Kamala Harris for president. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
In a phone call that was posted on Kamala Harris's social media channels, Barack Obama tells Harris, "We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office." Then, in a later statement, the couple said they would do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Since Harris's elevation to becoming the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee, Barack and Michelle Obama had held back from any endorsement of Harris, as many prominent Democrats offered their support. Barack Obama has cast himself as an impartial elder statesman of the party, not wanting to become too involved in the process of choosing a candidate himself. Meanwhile, it's been reported this morning by US media that Kamala Harris is hoping to have chosen a running mate to be her vice presidential candidate by the 7th of August.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with former US President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida home on Friday to get support for Israel's fight against Hamas. The two last met in person 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House. FSN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has met with multiple US leaders and officials this week, pushing for continued Washington support. The latest talks between Netanyahu and a Republican candidate for president, Donald Trump, were also a chance to mend relations. 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House, the two worked on a deal to normalize relations between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE, and the US Embassy was moved to Jerusalem. But Netanyahu was also quick to congratulate President Biden after he won the 2020 election, angering Trump. US officials and Trump have called for Netanyahu to finish the war with Hamas quickly and has cited how bad it is for him on a global stage.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance to the people of Gaza. Addressing a Security Council meeting on Friday, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in the enclave said the current conditions on the ground are making their work extremely difficult. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports from UN headquarters in New York.
In yet another Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza, the United Nations on Friday pleaded for the war to come to an end. It says, given the current conditions on the ground, the UN is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance, let alone scale up its operations. Over the last few weeks, several UN humanitarian convoys have been caught in crossfires. Council members all agree that humanitarian workers must be protected. The United States, however, added that Hamas's actions put humanitarian personnel at risk and that it could all end if Hamas accepted the ceasefire agreement on the table.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN. Two of the most notorious Mexican drug lords have been arrested in Texas. Sinaloa cartel co-founder Ishmael El Mayo Zambada Garcia and the son of the jailed boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman were allegedly tricked into boarding a plane to the United States. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the two men face multiple charges, including for the production and distribution of fentanyl into America. The Sinaloa cartel is considered one of the world's most powerful. Zambada co-founded it several decades ago with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was jailed following a trial in New York in 2019 and is now serving a life sentence plus 30 years. The French rail network has been hit by a series of arson attacks, causing major disruption as the Olympic Games gets underway. Other countries have also been impacted, with Belgian authorities conducting a series of counter-terror raids. Several people were detained on suspicion of participating in the activities of a terrorist group. Ever since Alex Carrier reports from Brussels.
7 individuals were detained during 14 raids across Belgium overnight. They will now be questioned by Belgian law enforcement suspected of planning terrorist activities. The country's federal prosecutor said the suspects' exact motives were still being established and made no official link to the Olympics. But French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin thanked Belgian law enforcement for leading a judicial operation to protect us, hinting at a potential link to the opening ceremony. Dozens of Belgian police officers, sniffer dogs and anti-drone teams have also been deployed to Paris to assist French authorities with the massive security operation.
Bangladesh has begun relaxing a week-long curfew, but security agencies warn that it could be reimposed in the event of fresh clashes. Local reports have put the death toll from violence between police and protesting students at over 200. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
Jack Daniels announced today its plan to start marketing directly to children, adding, quote, "Why not?" Executives for the whiskey company told reporters that they've already slated dozens of television spots showing 10-year-old children drinking tumblers of Jack and Coke in playgrounds, and that the company was planning on, quote, "just seeing how it all played out."
Every year, Jack Daniels sells millions of dollars of great American whiskey to men and women all over the world. So, for our next ad campaign, we basically just thought, hey, why not just start marketing this stuff straight to 10-year-olds? I mean, if they catch us, they catch us, but we'll see how far it goes, and hopefully we can sell some alcohol along the way. Sure, some parents groups could get upset, especially if we go with our idea of moms serving their kids cranberry Jack at snack time. But
in other news, a doomed rabbit will teach an 8-year-old a lesson about responsibility, and a torrent of soap issues from a wildly unexpected part of the dispenser. Well, that was it. It's all downhill from here, bud. For more, visit theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. We're back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Thanks for listening, one and all. Pakistan's government declared Israel's PM Benjamin Netanyahu a terrorist Friday. So remember, they're reporting from Pakistan, but they're reporting from Palestine, but they're talking about Pakistan's government. They declared him a terrorist on Friday, demanding him to be brought to justice for war crimes against Palestinians. Netanyahu, they say, quote, is a terrorist and a perpetrator of war crimes, said Rana Sanaullah, advisor to Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Quote, we demand that he, Netanyahu, be put on trial. We wholeheartedly condemn this cruelty, Israel's crimes in Gaza. We condemn Israel and all the powers that are involved in it, end quote. Sanaullah told reporters in Islamabad that Israel is a terrorist country and Netanyahu has committed war crimes. Also, he announced that his country will boycott the occupation state of Israel, adding that the government will form a committee to research which products had links to Israel. So that's big. And of course, many people are calling for a boycott of the Paris Olympics unless the Olympics do not allow the Israeli team to be there. Well, that's interesting stuff. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is interesting stuff. I'd like to get more amplification on, how's that, on some of the Israeli stuff, and then just talk a little bit about Zelensky from, of course, antiwar.com. So you can see the page at antiwar.com. Please check them out. They're fantastic. Follow them on X/Twitter and follow Dave DeCamp's Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp on YouTube. And you can see this. Yes, because, of course, Israel has attacked the Houthis. Houthi leader says Yemen is pleased to be in direct confrontation with Israel. The Israeli bombing of Hodeidah killed at least 6 people. On Sunday, Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi said Yemenis were, quote, pleased to be in a direct confrontation with Israel and vowed to hit back hard at the Israeli bombing of Yemen's Red Sea port of Hodeidah. Yemeni people are pleased to be in direct confrontation with the Israeli enemy, and they are steadfast and brave people, al-Houthi said, according to Iran's press TV. Israel bombed fuel depots in Hodeidah on Saturday following the Houthi drone attack on Tel Aviv that killed one person. Yemeni health authorities said the Israeli strikes killed at least 6 people and wounded 83, many with severe burns, as the attack caused a massive fire. And of course, this goes back to the Houthis in Yemen. Not necessarily going to say the Yemeni government, because the United States is trying to take control of that government, and the entire Houthi population seems to be turned against the United States. But of course, they were blocking Israeli shipping, not all shipping, but Israeli shipping and American-tied shipping in the sea. And of course, the United States multiple times attacked Yemenis and killed many civilians there over the past few months. So that's a big one from antiwar.com, and a couple other ones. This one, amazing, and of course, just typical. U.S. criticizes the International Court of Justice ruling that Israeli occupation of Palestine is illegal. So let me just figure this out. It's called occupied territory. Do we need any other answers? I don't get it. If it's occupied by a state that was put in there in 1947, how is it not illegal? The U.S. has criticized the International Court of Justice's ruling that said the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal and must come to an end, claiming it impedes a two-state solution. Yep. Quote, we are concerned that the breadth of the court's opinion will complicate efforts to resolve the conflict. You know, it's sort of like, you know, you get hit in the head by a bully, you speak up, you say, hey, that guy's a bully. You know, I'm concerned, says the bully, that you're calling me a bully might not allow for a resolution of our conflict. What conflict? You attacked me. I know. You've been attacking me for years. If I try to push you back, you're going to claim I'm the wrongdoer. Yes, I am. So if you kidnap people from my place and hold them over there, and my friends and I get together and we become violent, as bad as that is, it doesn't go both ways. No. It's only you guys are the bad guys. Oh, okay. The spokesperson said the ICJ ruling, the spokesperson from the U.S. State Department, because, you know, Biden's totally in control. The spokesperson said the ICJ ruling, which was a non-binding opinion, was, quote, inconsistent with the established framework. Well, guess what the United States is not party to? Oh, yeah, the ICJ. They're not in it. Why they're even speaking about it, I don't know. That is an additional layer of, I think it's the whipped cream of hypocrisy on that wonderful chocolate sundae of death. Jeez. Unbelievable. Then we've got the Speaker of the House. Yeah, the Speaker of the House, Johnson, you know, when he's not sitting beside Donald Trump at the RNC, praising Hulkamania. Speaker Johnson, supporting Israel is one of America's founding principles. Oh, yeah. Need I say more? House Speaker Mike Johnson, I am saying more. House Speaker Mike Johnson. And by the way, I know, I think Taylor had to leave. Taylor, thank you. I didn't get to catch you. He was saying thank you and, you know, thumbs up, guard, good guy, that sort of thing. Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate that. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of law, described U.S. support for Israel as one of America's founding principles. Well, you know, of course, they've been occupying America ever since the usurpation of the Articles of Confederation. He said this during a speech at an event hosted by the Republican Jewish Committee on July 18th. I'm glad the man who looks like such a brilliant Poindexter has got such a firm grasp on ethics, history, economics, and the U.S. Constitution. That's just wonderful. Quote, "It is an important principle that America and Israel stand together resolutely. That is part of who we are." Yeah, it's all the collective as a country. It's one of our founding principles. I believe that we maintain peace through strength. It's interesting how they confuse defensive strength with aggression and weapon smuggling and slaughtering of innocents. I haven't looked at the dictionary recently. I'm sure it's pulled a Wikipedia and has been redefined again. But we'll continue with this wonderful genius, Mike Johnson. Yeah, America and Israel stand together. It's one of our founding principles. I believe that we maintain peace through strength. And I think that the relationship with Israel is essential to who we are as Americans. Or as Joe Biden would say, we're America, for goodness sake. We're America. We're America. Hey, great. Isn't that wonderful? There you go. Now, let's head on over and give Dave DeCamp an opportunity to tell us some cool stuff. Go for it, Dave, man.
All right, the next one here. The U.S. criticizes the ICJ ruling on Israeli occupation. So another big thing that happened on Friday, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, delivered a ruling on the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, and determined that it was illegal and that it must end immediately. And of course, the U.S., which, they claim to oppose settlements and everything and want a two-state solution, they weren't too happy with this ICJ ruling. And they criticized it, claiming that it impedes a two-state solution. So a State Department spokesperson told Reuters, quote, "We are concerned that the breadth of the court's opinion will complicate efforts to resolve the conflict and bring about an urgently needed, just and lasting peace with two states living side by side in peace and security," end quote. The spokesperson also said the ICJ ruling, which was a non-binding opinion, was, quote, "inconsistent with the established framework," end quote. So in contrast, so you see the U.S. condemning this ruling. Do you remember just last week, the Israeli Knesset passed a resolution saying that they oppose the creation of a Palestinian state west of the Jordan. So that covers all the Palestinian territory. And the State Department was asked about that. And they said, that's Israeli, that's up to the Israeli Knesset. That's not our business. This is Vedant Patel. He said, quote, "I'll let Israeli officials speak to their own legislative chamber and the actions that the chamber takes," end quote.
In the meantime, we will continue giving them weapons. Man, what a nightmare. And can you imagine, again, the linguistic legerdemain to be able to say, well, if we recognize that Israel is an occupying nation state over the state of Palestine, the Gaza people, the people in Gaza, then that might cause problems for the resolution for a two-state solution. Well, where are you going to get the second state? It's like, duh. The second state is occupied. They were the first state. The new state is Israel. They're the occupying force. You're not going to get a two-state solution unless you recognize that one of the states is occupying the other state. It's just what are you going to invent it? It already existed. Golda Meir, as she pointed out, you probably have seen the footage. Grand Theft World has played it many times. She had a Palestinian passport. She was a Jew living in that area. It was from the area of Palestine before 1947. They had passports. Oh, man. It's just anybody who understands like any of the English language just sits there like, oh, you're kidding me. This is just insanity. Absolutely crazy, crazy stuff. Oh, my goodness. All right. I got one more that I want to give to you. So let's see. Let's go with this one. Yeah. All right. I'm going to play you this one. This is my, I think I got time. This is my new one for MRC TV, but we need a theme for this one. And It's
one of the biggest sales ever.
Wait a minute.
30 beef sticks for
that's better.
Just $30. Try for one.
All right, that's better. So we gotta go with this. I think you're gonna dig it. We need a theme from our friends in the punk world. Which friends are they? We have many. We have many friends. Their anti-authoritarian attitudes, many of them have lasted, which is nice. Some they went by the wayside. Some they lasted. Black Flag, mixed bag. But let's go with this, everybody, as we talk about New Jersey demanding something from newborn babies.
Gimme, gimme, gimme! I need some more! Gimme, gimme, gimme! Don't ask what for! 1, 2, 3, 4! Stand here like a loaded gun, ready to go off! I've got nothing to do but shoot my mouth off! Gimme, gimme, gimme! Gimme some more!
Yes! Gimme, gimme, gimme! All right, buddies, let's go with it. Now, what's this story all about? Well, it's actually something that allowed me to discover something. So let's check it out. Here we go.
Politicians in the New Jersey government want to steal the blood of newborn babies and genetically sequence it, keeping a complete DNA profile of every human born in the state. And guess what else? New Jersey already does part of this dystopian wickedness, and it's not alone in the United States. Hi, everyone. I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC TV. Hey, remember when New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, the Democrat, appeared on Fox News in April of 2020 and almost seemed to laugh at Tucker Carlson's curiosity as to how Murphy could reconcile the U.S. Constitution with his shutdowns of private gatherings, businesses, schools, and even outdoor recreation?
By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order? How do you have the power to do that?
That's above my pay grade, Tucker. So I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this.
Well, many viewers and many New Jersey residents likely saw that display for what it was: a childish, arrogant, insulting, and dangerous manifestation of government arrogance. And they might have seen his responses as warning signs for future offenses. Well, now, thanks to the Institute for Justice and the American Civil Liberties Union, the entire world not only can see that the governor and his ideological and political allies are indeed ready to take the rights invasions a step further into the realm of genetic dystopia, folks can also see that the New Jersey government already has been engaging in many facets of this criminal activity. The latest revelation is getting wider exposure thanks to the aforementioned organizations and thanks to Eric Bowen, who writes for Reason, quote, mandatory genomic sequencing of all newborns. It sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi story, but it could become a reality in New Jersey, where health officials are considering adding this analysis to the state's mandatory newborn testing regime, end quote. And of course, as government plotters often do, the pushers of this new invasion of privacy and data collection have created the seemingly ubiquitous advisory committee to hear the public and then, of course, advise precisely what the boosters of the new statute want. A go-ahead for the legislation. Quote, Ernest Post, chairman of the New Jersey Newborn Screening Advisory Review Committee, NSARC, discussed newborn genomic sequencing at an NSARC meeting in May. An NSARC subcommittee has convened to explore the issue and is expected to issue recommendations later this year. It's considering questions such as whether sequencing would be optional or mandatory, the New Jersey Monitor reported, end quote. Ah, yes, those recommendations. Most regular observers of the government predatory class know that this is just a beard term, a facade of public input that has little bearing on the trajectory of the new political mandate missile. And members of both the ACLU and the IJ also see this as a threat. Quote, such schemes have attracted criticism from civil liberties groups such as the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and the Institute for Justice, IJ. What we're talking about is information from kids that could allow the state and other actors to use that data to monitor and surveil them and their families for the rest of their lives, Dylan Reisman, an attorney with the ACLU of New Jersey, told the Monitor, end quote. Of course, the consequences of this plan are not the primary concern. It's the baseline, the demand for the blood, and the subsequent data collection that are the primary concerns. Even if the government did nothing with this data, the seizure of the blood is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment, which requires all government agents at every level of the United States political system to acquire a warrant from a judge upon that judge's public statement of probable cause before they can search and seize anyone or anything. And the warrant must cite only one person and specifically cite the item sought. And this is where the blood-based New Jersey version of the sci-fi film Gattaca doesn't just set off alarms for what might be in the works. As the Institute for Justice recently declared in a new class action suit, Phil Murphy's vampiric goons already have been demanding the blood of newborns. And the monsters in his state aren't alone. Notes Bohm, quote, IJ is currently representing a group of New Jersey parents in a class action lawsuit concerning the state's newborn testing practices. Like every other state, New Jersey requires hospitals to collect blood from newborn babies and turn it over to state health authorities who use it to screen for various diseases. And like many states, New Jersey is less than transparent about the process. Parents are simply told that the testing is mandatory. They are not told that they can object on religious grounds. They are not told what the state does with newborn blood samples after health screenings are completed. In fact, the state holds on to these blood samples for 23 years, putting no legal restrictions on how they can be used, end quote. By the way, leave it to bloodthirsty state politicians to, yeah, you got it, make cash off of their grabs. Quote, some states were found to be selling the blood samples to researchers or turning blood over to the Pentagon's DNA registry, end quote. As the Institute for Justice's website notes, their current suit against the already operational blood collection system has strong ties to principle and the Bill of Rights. They represent two New Jersey moms, Hannah Lovaglio and Erica Jedniak, and the IJ team writes, quote, shortly after giving birth, medical staff performed a routine heel prick. Their children's blood was collected on a card and whisked away to the New Jersey Department of Health's newborn screening laboratory to be tested for a range of disorders. New Jersey didn't seek Hannah's or Erica's consent first. Instead, each got a handout stating that New Jersey law mandated it. But that didn't raise any red flags for the two. Every state conducts such testing, and they trusted the system. But Hannah and Erica's real shock came upon learning what New Jersey didn't disclose. Unbeknownst to parents, a portion of their baby's blood remained unused after the screening was complete. And New Jersey had unilaterally decided that it could keep that blood for 23 years. Even worse, New Jersey believed it could use that blood however it saw fit, whether that be selling it to third parties, giving it to law enforcement, or even turning it over to the Pentagon. end quote. Can anyone other than the leeching, lording, largesse-eating legions of government, can anyone possibly see this as okay? How about this? Can those political parasites see that the American patriots who fought the British likely would be stunned by American politicians literally seizing people's blood? Now, Boehm notes that it's important to work out safeguards against this kind of collection and the proposed genomic testing currently being vetted in Murphy's dystopian New Jersey. But those safeguards already exist. The founders put them in the Bill of Rights.
We'll return with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Check us out live Monday through Friday on X, on YouTube, on Rumble, on Rockfin, and of course, you can always check out my Substack at the Gardner Goldsmith Substack.
A report released Tuesday by physicists at Stanford University revealed that the entire known universe, from the whole of human civilization to the totality of matter and energy, is actually the fictional setting of a cop show called Hard Case. According to authors of the report, existence as we know it was created solely to provide the framework for the primetime drama that airs weekly in a parallel universe, and that every historical event prior to the show's September 2008 pilot, including the Renaissance, World War II, evolution, the September 11th attacks, and the presidential administrations of Washington through Clinton, never actually happened and are merely part of the elaborate backstory crafted by Hard Case creator and showrunner Dominic Egan.
We used to believe that our universe operated under immutable laws of thermodynamics and gravitational relativity, but now we know everything just comes from the minds of Hard Case's 12 staff writers. Overall, it seems like a very well-written show.
Physicists have theorized that the universe as we know it will cease to exist whenever Hard Case airs its final episode.
This is the Onion News Network.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Former US President Barack Obama and his wife, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, have given their official endorsement to Kamala Harris for president. FSN's Mitch McCann reports.
In a phone call that was posted on Kamala Harris's social media channels, Barack Obama tells Harris, "We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office." Then, in a later statement, the couple said they would do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. Since Harris's elevation to becoming the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee, Barack and Michelle Obama had held back from any endorsement of Harris, as many prominent Democrats offered their support. Barack Obama has cast himself as an impartial elder statesman of the party, not wanting to become too involved in the process of choosing a candidate himself. Meanwhile, it's been reported this morning by US media that Kamala Harris is hoping to have chosen a running mate to be her vice presidential candidate by the 7th of August.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with former US President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago, Florida home on Friday to get support for Israel's fight against Hamas. The two last met in person 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House. FSN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
Israel's Prime Minister has met with multiple US leaders and officials this week, pushing for continued Washington support. The latest talks between Netanyahu and a Republican candidate for president, Donald Trump, were also a chance to mend relations. 4 years ago, when Trump was last in the White House, the two worked on a deal to normalize relations between Israel, Bahrain and the UAE, and the US embassy was moved to Jerusalem. But Netanyahu was also quick to congratulate President Biden after he won the 2020 election, angering Trump. US officials and Trump have called for Netanyahu to finish the war with Hamas quickly and has cited how bad it is for him on a global stage.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says it is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance to the people of Gaza. Addressing a Security Council meeting on Friday, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in the enclave said the current conditions on the ground are making their work extremely difficult. FSN's Jody Jacobs reports from UN headquarters in New York.
In yet another Security Council meeting to discuss the situation in Gaza, the United Nations on Friday pleaded for the war to come to an end. It says, given the current conditions on the ground, the UN is not in a position to provide the necessary assistance, let alone scale up its operations. Over the last few weeks, several UN humanitarian convoys have been caught in crossfires. Council members all agree that humanitarian workers must be protected. The United States, however, added that Hamas's actions put humanitarian personnel at risk and that it could all end if Hamas accepted the ceasefire agreement on the table.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. We're back with more Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. All right, let's get into our news flash coming to us from outer space to start things off. The mothership. Ha ha.
Hundreds of deranged psychopaths are going to give multiple standing ovations to a deranged psychopath. That's what we're about to witness.
Speaker, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
See that frame? I'll pause it right there. There it is, in the top left corner. Those are JDAMs. They're made by the United States. They're exported by the United States, given to Israel. Do you see anything here that looks like a military target? These are refugees in tents. So these are, again, just to kind of explain this to you, you've got people in Palestine who lost their homes because they were stolen by Israelis. They moved into Gaza, maybe in 1948, maybe in 56 and 67, who knows? But it's after 48. They move into Gaza. Now they have to move again. They get bombed. They have to move again. So you got people who've moved around literally multiple generations of their families, and now they themselves multiple times. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And they have to live like this. And then Israelis and Americans wonder why they get shot at. They wonder why the world hates them. If someone made you live in tents like this and bombed you, wouldn't you hate them as well? Wouldn't you pick up a rifle and shoot at them as well?
Members of Congress, I now have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel.
Yes? Oh, hello. Hello. We're Mary's parents. Oh, well, come on in, fellas. Hold it a second. Mary's parents burned to death last year. Wait a minute. I know you guys. You're from the News Flash.
The Israeli army stealing, looting, burning houses, shooting without limitation. Basically, they're giving green light to the soldiers to do whatever they want.
Yes, my friends, yes. Let's get right into our first story. And if you follow me on Twitter/X, if you follow antiwar.com, I want to give you the heads up, of course. Antiwar.com has offered us the key information, and I've got some video footage that I want to offer you, and it is stomach churning and highly insulting. Yes, the criminals have gotten back together, everyone. The criminals from Israel, the state of Israel, and their accomplices. Let's talk about war crimes, my friends.
Speak about the sunshine. Speak about the sunshine. Speak about the sunshine. This is the world destruction.
Africa Bambaataa, John Lydon giving us world destruction as, of course, your money, your sweat and toil is used to blow people up all over the place, whether it be Ukraine, whether it be inside Gaza or everywhere. It's the taking that is the initial immorality. You have a right to retain the fruits of your labor, regardless of any rationale or justification or flag that they wave or platitude that they offer or picture that they show of a person they want to save by stealing from you. And of course, we know that on balance, the Israelis are the occupiers. The people from Palestine are the occupied for generations. We know this as a fact. And of course, we also know a lot of other things that are true. So let's first go to, remember, if you want to speak up about this, well, you could be in trouble because Congress voted that if you speak up about the actions and policies of a state called Israel, you could be called anti-Semitic. As we saw yesterday, I was going to discuss this. This actually is from 2 days ago. Kyle Anzalone, Israel bombs tent of journalists. So I guess the journalists who covered this today for the pop media and didn't question Benjamin Netanyahu or the immorality or the unconstitutionality of sending weapons to that state, evidently they don't care about journalists. They certainly don't care about the civilians that are often not distinguished from Hamas because it's virtually impossible for the Israelis to do so. And of course, they didn't even distinguish them from their own Israeli citizens under the Hannibal Directive when they fought back on October 7th, after the Hamas people fought back, after the Israelis fought back, after Hamas fought back, going back generations, to, of course, the Western forces putting the state of Israel there. Yes, and displacing hundreds of thousands of people in a place that was called Palestine, and people actually had passports from it. Yes. Well, Israeli Defense Forces a few days ago dropped a bomb on a tent sheltering journalists covering the situation at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. On Monday, journalist Haider Ibrahim al-Mastir and several others experienced serious injuries when an Israeli munition hit a tent near the hospital in central Gaza. Yusuf al-Hindi, a rescue worker, told Middle East Eye, quote, "All the contents in the tent are journalistic equipment." Fantastic, huh? Awesome, awesome. Oh, what other items are there? Well, let's go to Washington, D.C. and the accomplices. This from Dave DeCamp today, and he had some great quotes on Twitter/X. We'll discuss this further at about 7 o'clock or so. Want to give you the headlines right off the bat. In congressional address, Netanyahu slams American protesters and receives standing ovation. Oh, yes, he did. I watched it at double time, and I've got some interesting quotes that you might find. So let's look at this. The war criminals gather, paid by our sweat and toil. Don't forget, UN, this is a few weeks ago, Israeli government attacks on refugee camp in Gaza may amount to war crimes. Yes, indeed. And don't forget that man on the screen, if you are just listening version audio-wise on freeworld.fm, then I'm showing pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, who, yes, openly stated that they have to continue supporting Hamas years ago to give them continued millions of dollars. And the United States government has given his government $3.8 billion every year as part of the must-pass omnibus budget. Every year for years. That's weaponry, money to his collectivist nation state, the occupying state, otherwise known as occupying the occupied territory of Gaza. So I think we know where the balance lies. Going back 2018, I cited that report about the lack of water in Gaza. Why? Because Israel controlled the water in Gaza. And of course, many people are getting slaughtered there all the time, including UN workers over and over and over again, whether they be food workers or others trying to provide health and medicine facilities to people or specialties to people. They're getting blown away. So this is what this man had to say to Congress after they gave him multiple standing ovations, as was predicted, and as some people like Thomas Massie openly boycotted it.
We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Look at all those people. Look at all those people. As Dave DeCamp writes, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday delivered an address to a joint session of Congress and spent a good portion of his speech attacking Americans who have been protesting Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. Well, here's a quick point. Even if it wasn't genocidal, even if they were helping people and not slaughtering innocent civilians, he has no right, and none of those people that you just saw on that screen have any prerogative over what you earn, over your life. They have no right to enslave you. Not Mittens, not any of them. None of them. Not Schumer, none of them. None of them have any moral claim over a second of your life. And yet they come up with all these justifications and rationales and patriotic slogans and all this other nonsense to further breach their own constitution and then pile on top of it the war crimes that they're funding and allowing Nikki Haley to use up a lot of ink to sign the armaments. By the way, one of the people in the Israeli Olympic team, he has also signed armaments. And someone brought up a very good point because there's a very strong push to boycott the Israeli Olympic team. They note that every male who was on the Olympic team is also a member of the Israeli military. They had to serve for the military. So maybe they might want to question where those people stand and what they might have participated in to leave a preposition dangling. Let's continue with a little bit more of this wonderful stuff.
It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life.
Isn't that curious? We saw some interesting footage about glorifying death, didn't we? And of course, now, as we know, because as we have been reporting and it has been confirmed, the IDF used the Hannibal Directive. They killed many of their own people. No one even knows how many of those people were killed on October 7th by the Israeli government and their forces. Now, in this speech, just to give you some quick thumbnails, in his speech, Netanyahu did some very interesting things. He deftly tried to reutilize the same disproven and unproven canards of gang rapes, children being put into ovens and burned, and so on. But what he did was he pulled back on some of those things, but terminologically reshaping them so that they can continue to have legs, despite the fact that the earlier claims about babies being stuffed in ovens and women being gang raped had no evidence to back them. So instead, he said rapes and children burned to death. Well, if you actually look at that highway of death, where clear armaments were used, those armaments were so massive. Burning those cars, they came from helicopters, Apache helicopters utilized by the IDF. All those charred up bodies that look so horrible, that wasn't done by Hamas. That was done under the Hannibal Directive, most likely by Israel. Either way, they can't prove Hamas did it. The armaments that could have done that were on the side of Israel, provided by your tax money. Burning those people alive and then utilized in a rhetorical fashion. Why don't they just say Hamas committed murders? That's bad enough. They have to add all that stuff to try to appeal to sexual violence being put in there, as if the violence isn't enough to try to say, does the person who's attacked have a right to defend him or herself? Well, generally speaking, a person does, but not if that person is illegally on somebody else's property, is part of an occupying force that is defended by a state. States are all immoral. Every state only operates through the coercion of its subjects and the seizure of their money. It is an immoral construct. All political systems operate that way. So then to pile on to that, all of these arguments, all these fake, bogus arguments that they come up with is pretty absurd. And by the way they treated protesters, let's go now over online to get some really quick information that I was able to record. Let me see if I've still got it here for you. And in fact, we could even start it up. Yeah, I'm going to go over to the live footage that the Gray Zone had. Max and Aaron were live today. Let me see if I've got it here. Yep, I've got it. Great. This is right when they started off. They didn't even have the frame the correct way, but it was great reporting. And he was discussing right off the bat, they started to use tear gas against the protesters. I don't know if you've ever been in these situations where the police show up and they're the ones that cause the problems. It happens all the time. All the time. Here we go.
Fuck it. Maybe you can tweet the link. We're live from the Washington, D.C. from the protest against Netanyahu's visit. There was just a little tussle down on 3rd and Constitution at the gates of the U.S. Capitol between the police who are assembled there and these marchers. There was pepper spray, there was tear gas. I want to go this way for some reason. I got to go down.
There's that, and there's a lot more there. I hope you get a chance to go to the Gray Zone site. Check that out. I think that it's really worthwhile. And final couple points here, some actual quotes, of course, because it wasn't just Netanyahu appealing to the United States to continue to send them weapons. It was Netanyahu implying that they have to go to war against Iran. Here's what Dave DeCamp said. He also repeated unsubstantiated claims that Iran was funding the protests in the U.S. Quote, they want to disrupt America, Netanyahu said, referring to Iran. For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. So you don't know, do you? No, of course he doesn't. Well, I have a message for those protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praised, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. Well, then what are the Capitol building people and us taxpayers? What are we if we are forced to fund you, as, of course, you are under indictment by the ICC for heading up a regime that literally raped men and women without any charges against them in prison prior to October 7th? That's why you're wanted in many states. Don't forget Pakistan. I guess you're not going to be speaking in Pakistan anytime soon there, are you, Bibi? Because they'd arrest you. They mentioned that a couple days ago. The government of Pakistan. People protesting Netanyahu included family members of Israeli hostages, because they're paid by Iran, who are being held in Gaza, who wore shirts inside the chamber during his address that said, seal the deal now, as the Israeli leader had been working to sabotage the chances of an agreement with Hamas to free the hostages. Why? Because he wants them to continue holding the hostages so that he can continue blasting civilians and take over Gaza, just like the map that he showed, where there are no Palestinians left. It's all Israeli territory, just like Donald Trump's son-in-law would like to see as well. And he openly stated it would be good oceanside property. Several of the hostage family members were reportedly removed by police and arrested. Well, let's hope they're not treated as poorly as the people who are arrested and held without charge in Israel. Or the J6ers. What a mess. Just unbelievable. The criminality of these people is so substantial, so in our faces. And here's more of Bibi Netanyahu talking about society. Society. This is what this guy's saying.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
And another standing ovation. So if you're not looking, there's Chuck Schumer. There's Liz Warren, I believe. And there is Dick Blumenthal, the guy who claimed he did service in Vietnam and that he was a war hero, and it was utterly bogus. Stolen valor, Mr. Connecticut Senator. What a bunch of absolute frauds. And they're all operating with your money. They're making you pay your cash, and if you don't, you'll go to prison. All right, we've got a little bit more. Look at the gall this guy's got.
My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil.
Okay, so let's just go back to some of the footage that we showed of the difference between good and evil. Actually, let's just mention a couple quick things. First, how about the difference between good and evil? Shall we? Let's check it out. Here's a little something that you saw. We used a couple minutes, maybe 30 seconds of this. This is a 4-minute long piece. We show part of it right now of a journalist who's been on the ground there, describing many of the things that you and I have shared long distance. He's been on the ground, just like Max and Aaron have been on the ground in Gaza numerous times. Aaron lived in Israel, went back and forth to Gaza. So did Max. And here's a little bit of the civilization versus brutality motif. It says here, a new investigation confirms Israeli soldiers have permission to shoot and abuse civilians in Gaza.
The Israeli army stealing, looting, burning houses, shooting without limitation. Basically, they're giving green light to the soldiers to do whatever they want.
Israeli journalist Oren Ziv collected testimonies from 6 soldiers who completed their active duty in Gaza. They told Plus 972 magazine about a culture of revenge among Israeli soldiers.
They described it that many times they would shoot for fun, out of being bored, just to awaken the area to see if there's anything there. One soldier said that even if you had a small sense of fear, you could shoot. You didn't have to justify this. Nobody would ask questions.
2 soldiers described Israeli forces near systematically burning down Palestinian homes after occupying them. And if you are listening, just audio, one guy is taking some form of hairspray or gas or something like that is clearly a propellant, and he's lighting a lighter underneath it and lighting off a mattress.
Gather the mattresses, they would gather the furniture that was left and just set it on fire and go out. Some of them are proud in what they're doing. They brag about it in social media. And this was, as it seems, an official policy and not just an initiative of specific units or groups of the army.
Israeli newspaper Haaretz obtained information in January indicating commanders frequently told soldiers to set Palestinian homes on fire. Because, you know, that's what civilized people do. BB.
I think the fact that Israeli politicians called for revenge from day one went down and gave also this feeling of support to the commanders and to the soldiers that they have impunity. They would have a red line in populated area that the Israeli army ordered people to leave, but not always everybody could or chose to leave. And in this red line, if somebody would pass it, they would be shot immediately.
The testimonies align with months of eyewitness accounts and visual evidence showing likely war crimes committed by Israeli soldiers. Multiple videos show Israeli soldiers executing unarmed Palestinians. There's one with the bicycle. Boom. In March, Al Jazeera published footage showing Israeli forces shooting dead 2 Palestinians on Gaza's beach. They were waving white fabric to show they posed no threat. A third person was also injured. The footage shows Israeli forces attempting to hide the executions using a bulldozer to bury the 2 men in rubbish and sand. So there's a little sample of the civilized Israeli forces, and there's a lot more. I want to go back actually here to Rachel Blevins and her excellent program, just to give you another quick overview as we talk a little bit about what was expected, and that's exactly what we saw. This recorded before Mr. Netanyahu spoke.
Hundreds of deranged psychopaths are going to give multiple standing ovations to a deranged psychopath. That's what we're about to witness. The whole world is watching this in a state of disbelief.
This is Liberty Conspiracy on Free Talk Live. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to